IB Nation, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Thursday, September 11th, and before we start today's show, I feel like the memory of today has been a little bit overshadowed by some of the other evils that have been happening in our world the last few days. But I always try to remember to start today off with just a reminder of people of kind of what this day represents, what this day means, especially for people of an older generation like myself who are a little bit more grown for that period of time. And it's remembering what we went through as a country. But I also think about what we were like the day after 9/11, when we were as unified as we were. And there was a feeling of we were all one nation. We all of different races and different stripes and different political views, but we were one nation, and how I pray that we could somehow get back to that after everything that we've been going through. And that's just, this day reminds me even more so of that, Trevor. And I just like to start the show off with that. And yeah, when I was with Angela at the hospital at St. Joseph Memorial Hospital, or St. Joseph Hospital, there's a beam from the towers there and a memorial for 9/11. And it's just scrolling the names of the people that were lost that day. And you just remind, what that meant. And, just all the things that have happened since then. So I just want to, remember that day and remember the men and women who sacrificed that day, the firefighters who ran towards danger while everybody else was running away. They ran too. The police officers that saw it and ran to it, they have a level of courage that someone like me will never understand. And it is greatly appreciated, and we will never forget their sacrifice and all of the other citizens who just were going to work that day and lost their lives simply because they were Americans and didn't believe in something that somebody else believed in. And then you see how that's now so much more prominent in our country, which is sad. And Trevor, something you and I were talking about before we got this show started. So one thing that I do want us to do is say, let's rally around the one thing that we do have in common, and that is Notre Dame football. And so I want to remind us all of that somber moment and continue to pray for those families and just pray for our country and just that it needs healing and needs a revival in a lot of ways. But one thing we are going to get to do this weekend, Trevor, is because of the freedoms of those who fight for us, we can talk a little football and we can watch a little football this weekend. And so we're going to continue to focus on that for the remainder of the show. And it's a big game for Notre Dame this weekend. And it's a big moment for Notre Dame this weekend. And we're going to today talk about the keys to victory for Notre Dame. We got some offensive and defensive ones. A little bit interesting conversation that you and I had today, Trevor, about some of the keys, because it's not – there's some that are like, okay, this is specific to this game, but some that are like, this is more about the character of the football team more so than a specific – football thing, and we'll dive into that. And then we're going to also make our game predictions for the Notre Dame and Texas A&M game. We'll predict our game records. That'll be fun. I always enjoy doing that. And then you and I are going to break down some other games, Trev. We're going to talk Georgia, Tennessee. We're going to talk Clemson, Georgia Tech, and we're going to talk Florida, LSU. And then we'll just kind of quickly work through some other games that he and I are going to have our eyes on. It's not a loaded weekend of college football games outside of Notre Dame and Texas A&M and then Florida or Georgia, Tennessee, but still some very interesting games here in week 3 that we're going to talk about as well. So I'm ready to get rolling, Trevor. How are you today? And I'm ready to get into this, man, because this is we're 2 days out. It's 2 days out. Well, 2 days and 6.5 hours out from this big one happening for Notre Dame this weekend.
It's weird to think that the college football season has been going on for 20 days and Notre Dame has played a game.
I know.
Isn't that weird?
It's the worst.
No, I was sitting here and I was like, it feels like borderline. It almost feels like their season hasn't even kicked off yet. I know it has because we watched the game, but it's just between the bye week and then even their game wasn't on the Saturday with the big slate with Ohio State and Texas and LSU and Clemson. They had to wait the additional day, and then they have a bye week followed up by what seems like another premier week 1 type of matchup. And so I'm excited to dive into it today, man. And we're going to start this off by talking, we always break down keys to victory, but we're going to start with team keys to victory and then get into offense and defense here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. And when you go and you think of this, Brian, there's a lot of implications for this game. There's a lot of things that Notre Dame is going to have to accomplish as a team if they want to walk off the field sometime probably around 10:45 at night on Saturday with a win.
Yeah, Trev, we added this little segment because normally we just do offense and defense, but we added this little segment because I do think there are some things that are bigger than just, okay, execute on third down or, control the line of scrimmage, start fast, all the things we're going to talk about. I think there's a couple other things that permeate really through the entire team that will then lead to whether you will or won't have success in those things. And I think the biggest thing for me is I want to see Notre Dame come out and play with some fire. I want to see them come out with energy and intensity. And that was a big frustration I had is it's lazy to say they played soft or they didn't have that's like a bad take, but they still didn't have the same kind of urgency and intensity and fire and physicality that we're used to seeing from this team, right? So again, we like to go from extremes, right? They're either playing Notre Dame football or they were soft and didn't care, didn't look like they wanted to be out there. They looked like they wanted to be out there. They just didn't look like a team that was necessarily mentally ready for the type of game that was going to be, that didn't quite play with the same kind of force. Because if they were soft or didn't play hard, they would have got beat by way more than 3 by Miami. But I still feel like there's a level of energy and urgency and fire and energy and just flying to the ball or playing with the tempo and playing with the physicality that this team needs to play with. And that's got to be the foundation of everything that we're talking about moving forward, Trevor. If that's not there, this game becomes much harder to win for Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to what is your team identity. And one thing that we got so used to seeing last year with this team is no matter what the situation was in the game and no matter how bleak the outlook was, I think back to, when they weren't playing that well against USC and USC was hanging around, or, first half against Penn State. One of the things was the team came out with fire. They came out with the confidence that they were going to come back and win this football game. I think back to Marcus Freeman's halftime speech against Penn State and the fire that they came out with on the opening possession of the third quarter. And there was just a little lack of that when they played Miami, which was interesting. That was one of the more concerning takeaways that I had from the game. And it's not so much to your point, they weren't soft, but it was just that fire that we're used to seeing from guys like Adon Schuler and guys like Drake Bowen and watching Emil Wagner get fired up after a touchdown and things like that. We didn't see that. And that's something that I hope that they get back to. And now you have all of the ammunition for it. You lose in week 1. You're playing at home at night in your season or in your home opener under the lights against the top 20 team. It's one of those where if you can't get up for this one, what's it going to look like the rest of the season?
Yeah. Part 2, and this kind of ties in with that, Trevor, is I want to see a football team that knows how to handle adversity. And that's twofold. That's coming into the game, which ties into the first point. How do they handle what happened this weekend? It's interesting how 2 people can watch the same press conference and come to completely different points of view.
Yeah.
And I've seen people talk about how the players on Tuesday night, didn't look like they were confident. And then I've seen other people that no, they were matter of fact, they know exactly what's going on and they're going to go out there and handle business. I don't know which one that is. I didn't realize there's this many body language experts in our country. But how they play will ultimately tell the story of where they were and of where they are in their headspace. So how do you handle the adversity of losing the season opener? How do you handle the adversity of not playing well as an individual player? How do you handle, the fact that, hey, you're going to look in the mirror and say, hey, we lost this football game and I'm, I got to own my role in it and then fix it and get better. But then even if you come in with the right mindset and you come out right away and boy, you're coming out, you're ready to roll. And then something happens, something bad happens, a turnover, a blown coverage that leads to a score, a bad play on special teams, something like that happens. How do you handle that? What was so great about last year's team is they could handle those things pretty well. You come out against Louisville, you've just been kind of booed on your home field the week before against Miami of Ohio, and you've got to start fast. That was, obviously a big key in that game. And what do they do on the first interaction of the game? You fumble the opening kickoff. Louisville gets the ball. They go down and score a touchdown. And you're like, well, we're going to find out where this team is. And what do? They go right down the field and score. And then Notre Dame scores, I think, 21 unanswered points. at that point in time, right? Like that's handling adversity. Yeah, they came in fired up, but when things kind of hit the fan during the game, they responded well. And so when I look at this football team, Trev, every team is different. Just because some of the players on this team were part of last year's team doesn't mean this team's going to respond the same way. But how will this team respond to the adversity of the opening game loss, but then also adversity that will inherently come in a game like this? I mean, even games where Notre Dame won convincingly last year, there was some level of early game adversity. An injury, a turnover, a mistake. I mean, the Stanford game, Notre Dame won that game by 6 touchdowns. But early in the game, they were sloppy. They had some misplays. You had the Bo Collins fumble. You had a blown assignment that let Ashton Daniels go for a long play. There was adversity you had to overcome. They did, and they ended up rolling. So there will be some adversity that also happens during the game, Trevor, and how this team handles that is going to, A, tell us a lot about this football team, but then also, B, it's going to have a big role to play in how, whether or not Notre Dame can come away with a victory at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely. And we saw individuals be able to handle adversity against Miami. But it was at the individual level. We're talking big picture team goal here to walk away with a win on Saturday night against Texas A&M. We watched CJ bounce back from throwing an interception. And yes, I understand it was a crazy interception. It's bounces off of Jordan Faison, Greathouse tips it in the air, and then the corner kicks it with his heel, and then Ruben Bain picks it up. I understand but it was the wrong read. And he bounces back and leads Notre Dame on consecutive scoring drives. So we saw that individual. We watched Malachi Fields bounce back after taking some time on the sideline after the fumble and have 2 big catches in the game. We watched Eli Raridan continually battle adversity where he drops 2 passes and then rips off a 65-yard reception to put them down inside of the red zone. We watched Boubacar Traore overcome some adversity, which they just weren't generating enough pressure as a unit, and he was able to be the only player who walked away with a sack that night. That has to be team-wide. I could not agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. When I look at this team and I break down what they need to do overall, you and I were talking before, again, about just overall keys. And one of them is you have to win situational football. And I think that conversation has to start around the middle 8.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame got absolutely dominated in the middle 8 of last game. Miami took over with the ball with a little over 5 minutes left in the second quarter against Notre Dame in the first half. And Notre Dame got the ball back once, and it was when they took a knee at the end of half. 5-minute long, 75-yard scoring drive. Miami opens up the second half with over a 7-minute long, 75-play scoring drive. Notre Dame touched the ball once in the middle 8, and it was to take a knee. You have to find a way to win the middle 8. How do you do that? You have to be more efficient on third down, on offense and on defense. You have to keep drives alive on offense, and you have to find a way to get off the field on defense. Absolutely have to. You have to find a way to win the turnover battle. Like you and I have talked about on the show so many times, Notre Dame last season led the country with 33 takeaways. 32 of them came in wins.
Yep.
Football can be a complicated game at times, Brian. That's not that complicated.
And sometimes not. That's right.
And sometimes it's as simple as, hey, when Notre Dame wins the turnover battle, that is a huge indicator that they're on their way to win. Situationally, they have to be better.
And you can win games and win the turnover battle or lose the turnover battle when you're playing teams that aren't very good.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to struggle to do that when you're playing teams that are good. And that's obviously going to be a big thing. The Texas A&M game last year, Trev, perfect example. Hard-fought game, close game. Notre Dame won by 10, but that was a tie ball game in the fourth quarter. What was a big part of that game? Texas A&M turned the ball over twice. Notre Dame didn't turn the ball over at all. A week later, you lose by 2 points in Northern Illinois. You turn the ball over twice. They turned it over 0 times. I mean, it's not that complicated when you're talking about when you play good teams. The next time that Notre Dame lost a turnover battle after Northern Illinois was against Penn State. And that played a big role in Notre Dame needing some late big plays to kind of, make that game happen. So, and what was it that kind of got them back in the game? It was finally forcing a turnover at the end of the game that allowed them to win that football game. So you were correct. It's not, it's a big part of the game. There's no doubt. And when you talk about that, there's more to this. The situations, Notre Dame's got to win the situations. Trev, you talk about the middle eight, you talk about the turnover battle. I think they lost on third down, both sides of the ball on Sunday night against Miami. They were not very good on first down. Miami was very good on first down. There were a lot of those aspects of it that were not there on in the opener against the Hurricanes. One area where Notre Dame did well was, which is partly why the game was maybe a little closer than it could have been with how poorly Notre Dame played, is Notre Dame went 3 of 3 and all touchdowns in the red zone. Miami went 2 of 4 on touchdowns in the red zone, 3 of 4 overall, including settling for a field goal. So you did win the red zone battle in that game, which helped keep that game closer. And you're going to have to do that again against Texas A&M. So I think a lot of those situational football type of scenarios, which I think have a lot to do with preparation and coaching and focus, you lost a lot of those against Miami. And you've got to get that back. And it's not just about getting it back, Trev, but to your point, these are areas where Notre Dame dominated last year. You talked about the turnover battle. Notre Dame was one of the best teams in the country when it came to, winning turnovers. They were plus 18 last year, Trev. Plus 18. That's really impressive. But the other part is they dominated the middle eight last season. Dominated it. And so this is it's not just about the practicality of winning football games. It's also getting back to, can you establish an identity? You say, well, you need to get back to your identity. Well, this isn't last year's team. They're not getting back to their identity. This team still has to establish its identity. And I think all these things that you and I talked about, coming out and playing with a certain level of energy and focus. There can be scenarios, Trev, where you are overhyped up. You've got too much maybe energy going on. You're not focused. You're not disciplined. You make mistakes that you're like, dude, you can't do that, man. Like, you got to be better than that. But it's a discipline within that fire and energy. It's about how do you handle adversity. It's about, can you win the key situations? What does Mark Sherman say? Win the intervals kind of thing. Can you do that and establish that this team is also that way? Because as of right now, they're not. And so I think that's going to be a big key. I don't care if you do it next week against Purdue, to be completely honest with you. I don't care if you do it against Boise and an inferior opponent. I don't care if you do it, to future Stanford. I care that you do it in the big games. And that's why I think this game is so important, because can they establish it against what we have argued in the summer? And it may or may not come true, but what we argued in the summer was their toughest opponent. Can they show that identity? Can they establish that identity in a game like this? Then you're going to say, okay, I feel better about the opener. We can now chalk that up to kind of, hopefully, or maybe chalk that up to opener on the road, bad weather, just a lot of things happened. It just was one of those days. But this team has rebounded and they're going to be fine. I think that's why these things are so important, because it's not only going to help us learn, it's not only going to help them win the football game, but it's going to help us learn a lot about who this football team is.
Oh, I agree completely. Look, man, I think one of the things that makes some teams so impressive, you think of some dynastic programs over the course of, let's just say, the start of the 2000s. What have always been the teams that have been prevalent? Well, there's, Alabama, of course. There's Clemson had their run from really 2013 to 2020. You had, Ohio State has always been in that conversation, talking those upper echelon teams. And every year they have new rosters, new faces, give or take a couple of positions. But their program identity is still the same. Nick Saban at Alabama was always known for having a good defense. You rotated players all the time. Whether, you go from, having D. Milner to fast forward to the end of the tenure when you have Trayvon Diggs and Pat Surtain II. But the thing that remained constant was your program identity. Marcus Freeman's program identity needs to be playing with fire and aggression and winning the middle eight, winning the turnover battle, regardless of who lines up and who's in the two deep. Now, I think that is something that is at stake. I agree with you completely, because if they're not able to do it in the big games, it's not going to matter what you do against inferior level opponents. So I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Couldn't agree more. Well, listen, folks, that is going to do it for part one of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But Don't go anywhere. We have plenty more to cover. We're diving into keys to victory for the offense and the defense next. But before we get there, make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Vince and I are going live tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time to do the 4th installment of the spread option. We're going to be talking about some of the games today, some of the different spreads, locks, and what you guys should stay away from this week. So be sure you're tuned in there and subscribe to the channel. And then, as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, on part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. We are talking Notre Dame keys to victory over Texas A&M. We're doing it how we always do it. We're breaking down offense, and then we're going to break down defense. And when you look at this unit, there is a lot of good takeaways from the Miami game and a lot of things that they need to adjust on. And unfortunately, even though, like I said before, college football has been on for about 20 days, we've only seen Notre Dame play once. And so some of the things that they're going to have to improve on, we've only seen one game of a sample size. But when you look at this matchup, I know everybody knows where we're going to start with this one, but starting fast always has different connotations to it depending on the opponent. But, Brian, nonetheless, Notre Dame is going to have to start fast on Saturday night.
I mean, it's the most obvious one that we have, but it's the most applicable too. I mean, look, we have been begging for this for a long time. Just come out and put teams away. I watch certain teams play, even against inferior opponents, and it's like, wouldn't it be nice if you could just bench a quarterback at halftime because he's 18 of 19 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns at the half, and you've scored 50-some points against a really bad team? Or wouldn't it be great if you're 20 points better than the team, that you actually beat that team by 20 points? You know, it'd be really nice. And last year, you know, Notre Dame had their moments like that. Like the Purdue game was over at halftime, but there were a lot of games where, like Florida State game, you're like, dude, why are they letting this terrible team hang around? Stanford game, why are they letting this terrible team hang around? And then obviously they start blowing them out in the third quarter. But it's just kind of like, I want to see this team come out and find a way to establish some early momentum on offense. And I would say this has been primarily in the past couple of years a offensive problem. There have been moments where the defense will kind of start slow, but it hasn't been often. I mean, I didn't think they were great coming out of the gate against Georgia Tech last year. They weren't great on that first series against Stanford. They were pretty good early in the bigger games last year, though. You know, obviously outside of their last couple. I mean, they were great early on against Indiana, great early on against Georgia. You know, great early on against Texas A&M. I thought that defense was very strong early in that game last year. The defense actually did a great job against Louisville early in that game when you consider they held Louisville to 24 points, and 2 of their touchdown drives combined for like 29 yards or something like that.
If that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was defense actually did a good job of weathering that early storm after that early touchdown, which covered 20-some yards, and keeping Louisville in check till the offense figured some stuff out. So it just comes down to it. And there's, for this week, Trev, there's different reasons why starting fast is important every week. And for this week, the first thing is you've got to give your fans a reason to believe. Yes, it's frustrating how fickle some fans can be, but you know what? That's life, you know, and they're paying hundreds of dollars to come watch you play. And some people are spending airline tickets and, you know, getting rental cars and paying $300-400 a night for a hotel in town because they want to come watch you play, and they want to see you play with fire. They want to see you play hard. They want to see you play well. I mean, that's what they do. I've said before, I'm not a big fan of booing. I've never booed an athlete in my life, but I mean, I also say, hey, that's you pay that money, and if that's something you choose to do, you know, whatever, you do what you got to do. But there's a really easy way to make sure that they don't boo you, and that's play well early. I think even more importantly is a fast start gives the offense confidence. If they come out and they're just playing poorly, missing blocks, missing throws, missing runs, missing catches, things like that, turning the ball over, now all of a sudden there starts to be some finger pointing going on, or there starts to be a lack of confidence going on. And all of a sudden this is a team that just doesn't have that unity that you want. And you can start to see it fester a little bit in the Miami game. You could see some of the frustrations for certain people not getting the ball enough, or, not getting, blocks not happening, things like that. You come out in this game and you start off fast and you just put some early scores on the board against Texas A&M, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're good, we got this. Because you don't have that Riley Leonard figure to rally the team around. CJ Carr, I think, will eventually get there, but he's still the unproven guy that can't be counted on to lead this football team. You need other guys to be those leaders. And so we're going to find out a little bit about sort of the leadership that this unit has, Trev, but also how disciplined is this unit? How locked in is this unit where they can kind of come out and handle their business and make those plays? And look, you go back and break the game down. It was one guy here, one guy there, but that's football. I mean, that's how the game works. It's a lot of times it's just one guy didn't do his job, especially when it's one very important guy, like a quarterback or a left tackle or a running back or a corner or a free safety, where it's like you're just kind of, everybody knows when you make a mistake. So you're going to need those things to be cleaned up and start fast, because it's going to give you more confidence. And then, of course, anytime a road team gets behind the 8 ball early and you jump on them quick, that gets them out of their game. When Notre Dame scored on first drive of the game, turn the ball over. You're like, you got to be kidding me. Then the defense gets it back, and the offense says, okay, we're good now. 98-yard touchdown run. Then the next drive, they go down there and 16-play drive. And all of a sudden, Indiana was completely out of their game at that point in time. It was very similar to kind of what Miami did to Notre Dame in the opener. You score to make it 7-7, and the next thing you know, next time you take the field, it's 21-7, and now you're out of your game. So that's an important part of this too, Trevor, is get A&M on their heels by coming out and taking it right to them and starting fast and make their offense play from behind in this game.
Well, and part of what you're talking about too, Brian, is staying fast. That's the biggest thing. We talked a couple weeks ago where I mentioned, it didn't feel like Notre Dame started games fast. And on their first possession, went back through and we broke down some numbers. Notre Dame scored on 10 of their opening possessions, put points on the board on 10 of their 16 opening possessions on offense last season. It was against Texas A&M, Northern Illinois, Purdue, Louisville, Navy, Florida State, Virginia, Army, USC, and Ohio State. So oddly enough, 2 of the games that they lost, they scored on their opening drives. Here's the catch. In 7 of those 10, their following drive was a 3-and-out. Not even that they punted. Not even that it was a turnover on downs. 7 of them were 3-and-outs or a turnover. It just can't happen. Sustaining your fast start, because, Brian, you are 100% correct. When you're going up against a road team and you jump on them early, that's great. But if you're not able to follow that up, your 7-0 lead with 7 minutes left in the first quarter starts to look a lot different when you're at 2 minutes and 50 seconds left in the second or in the first half and the score 7-3. Because then the messaging starts to change for the away team. It's, hey, we're in this. We're down by 4. It's a 1-possession game, and we get ball at half. And to a lot of the people that watch Notre Dame's media team, I'm sure that halftime speech sounds real familiar, because that is exactly what Marcus Freeman said to Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl against Penn State. So starting fast, 100%, but they have to find a way to sustain drives and keep their fast start, maintain momentum. And that's going to fall into all those things. But, Brian, when we talk keys to victory on offense, you got to start fast. You got to remain fast. But then we take it to another level. How do you do that? How do you do that? And that leads us into key number 2, Brian.
Yeah, and I love that point, Trevor, about the starting fast part too, because, I think that there are so many things that go into it. It's not just a theoretical start fast. Well, why did you start fast? And that's where a lot of these other keys are gonna be. And the first one is, in this specific game, this is unique to Texas A&M. I felt like Notre Dame got real stagnant in the opener. And so it's like, don't be stagnant. And here's what I mean by that. I'm sure there's a lot of valid reasons why they didn't use a lot of motion in the game. There wasn't a lot of tricky movement. There wasn't a lot of shift here, move to there. There was very little of that. The motions that they did were easy to kind of react to. They didn't really do anything to expose what the defense did. They were just kind of like about getting the tight end and the proper leverage to go make a block. There wasn't a lot of that. And then on top of that, they went real slow. So we weren't seeing the ball get snapped with any kind of urgency. And what that does is, when you don't really do any threatening motions, it allows, and then you don't snap the ball with any kind of pace, it allows the defense to get set. It allows the defense to then get calls in. You're looking to the sideline, making your check. Then you go back. Well, guess who else is communicating to their defense? It's the coaches on the other team. And so to me, it was frustrating to watch them not do anything to put a Miami team learning a brand new system in any kind of pre-snap binds, pre-snap tough situations. That really frustrated me. I don't want to see that again. I mean, I thought Miami did a pretty good job of using movement to get guys free. And I want to see Notre Dame do some of that in this game. And I'm not just talking about like take your Z from one side to the other side. Like that's obviously part of motion, that there's keys that you can learn from that, but it's also about, doing things that are going to force them to communicate and make quick decisions. I've pointed out time and time again on the show how something as simple as a quick stack motion or a motion across where you get into a stack position and then invert the snap can create a lot of problems. And we saw that plenty of times last year where it allowed guys to kind of get free, whether we're talking about, the Purdue game. We saw this against Louisville. There's plenty of instances where this happened. And I want to see more of that from Notre Dame in this game. Have more and if you don't want to motion a bunch, then go with more pace. I'm not saying go up tempo, but play with more pace. Get up, get lined up, hustle up to the line, get lined up, get your calls, and go. Get them on their heels, attack. And I just felt like there was way too much. Everything just was going slow on Sunday night against Miami. And what I mean slow is not like a bunch of slow athletes were out there. There just was no urgency from the offense and how they lined up and how they did their motions and when they snapped the ball, there was no urgency after the snap. That's got to get fixed. And I think the game plan can have a lot to do with that. The game plan and how you kind of get guys moving and get guys going early can kind of have an impact on what's the tempo and the pace that they play at. And so I need to see more of that from them in this game, Trevor. And if they can do that, I think they'll be able to get this thing going. I mean, because at the end of the day, I still think Notre Dame's got the better players than Texas A&M. And I think especially true on this side of the ball. There's a closer matchup, in my opinion, on the other side of the ball, where you could argue A&M's talent on offense is as good as Notre Dame's talent on defense. It's at least arguable. I don't think that's really arguable in this particular matchup. I don't think Texas A&M's defensive talent is as good as Notre Dame's offensive talent. If Notre Dame's offensive talent, however, plays like they did in the opener, then you make it a little bit easier for them to defend you. And so that's a big key for me, is just don't be stagnant. And it's similar to, like last week's get them on their heels, go at them, be aggressive. It all kind of is summed up in the whole don't be stagnant. It's about being aggressive, playing fast, using motion, getting them off center, make them communicate. All those things kind of fall into this key of don't be stagnant. That's something I absolutely want to see from the offense early in this game.
Oh, couldn't agree more. It goes back to the conversation that we had yesterday, Brian, about on paper, these matchups favor Notre Dame. You break it down by position group. You look on paper at Notre Dame's offensive line, they should win the matchup against Texas A&M's D-line. You look at the matchups between tight ends and running backs and their linebackers and safeties, and that matchup favors Notre Dame. Same thing with the cornerback position and the wide receiver position. But at the end of the day, I'm with you. You need more movement. You got to put yourself into favorable matchups in the run game and in the pass game. But you're not going to be able to do that unless your offensive line handles business up front. And that might be, especially after the Miami game, that might be the most obvious one to some watching in the chat right now. But Notre Dame can have C.J. Carr and Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse and Jeremiah Love and J.D. Price. But like we saw against Miami, if your offensive line isn't able to hold their own against a productive and a good defensive line at Texas A&M, then you're going to run into a lot of the same issues that you ran into on Sunday, August 31st. Offensive line play has to get better, and it starts here. And this is one of those keys to victory that if it doesn't perform well, these are going to be one of them that will carry over into weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks if it doesn't get fixed. Because you can fix utilizing motion. You can fix, hey, there's things that we can adjust schematically to put ourselves into more favorable matchups. But if the offensive line doesn't handle their business up front, that's going to be an issue that will have to get fixed with personnel changes, schematic changes, you name it, anything under the sun. But that is such a huge key to victory in this game, Brian.
It is, Trev. Honestly, dude, I've talked so much about the line play this week. It's maddening.
Yep.
Honestly, I'd rather kind of hear your take. I've said this before. Notre Dame's an offensive line-driven program. And we're now 3 years into a tenure of an offensive line coach, and we've yet to see this offensive line play at a high level with any kind of consistency whatsoever. And I know there's all these excuses of why it didn't happen, whatever the case may be. I mean, I was talking to Sean Davis earlier, and he made a comment. He said, it's been 17 straight games that we just don't know what we're going to get from the offensive line in pass pro. And I said, dude, I'll do you one better. It's been 30 games in a row, because I would argue that in 2023, we kind of had an idea of what Joe Alt was going to give us, but I didn't know what I was going to get from Blake Fisher from week to week.
No.
He's a starting offensive lineman in the NFL, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And it was an issue there. So it gets to the point where it's like, what is the reason why? And you got to fix it. And we need to see some of those fixes in this game. But I've ranted about the offensive line enough this week. I want to get your thoughts on just like the matchup and, can they win this matchup? Should they win this matchup? Because I think everybody knows my opinion on this one.
Yeah.
And I've ranted enough about it this week.
I get you, man. Look, at the end of the day, can they? Absolutely. Just like they had the same opportunity to win their matchup against Miami. Just like they had their same opportunity to win the matchup against Ohio State and Penn State and Georgia and Indiana and USC. But at the end of the day, and I know this is going to come across as lazy, but at some point, like I've talked about before, there's aspects about football that are extremely complicated. And then there's some aspects that are relatively simple. And with the offensive line, it comes down to one simple fact. It is now put up or shut up time. From the coach that oversees the unit and from all 5 players. You can talk in press conferences all you want about, the leadership is exceptional and players are coming up to the center and the left guard asking for their advice. And you got 2 captains on there and, your left tackle was a freshman All-American, and that's great. And the list of accolades is impressive. But until you start playing like that unit, until you start showing who you are truly on the field, I simply just don't care anymore. Because in 2023, you had a first and second round draft pick, respectively, at left and right tackle. Since the day Marcus Freeman got hired, you talked about how you're going to be a line-driven program. And the way that you're going to win football games is dominating the line of scrimmage and finding ways to run the ball and stop the run. The defensive line, for all the scrutiny that Al Washington has been under, has answered the bell more often and more consistently than what the offensive line has, in my opinion. And so it's to the point now where we can talk about, this matchup, and this is how many pressures that Cassius Howell has generated, and this is what Emil Wagner has given up in this game, but not given up in this game. And it is now put up or shut up time. The one spot on the offensive line that you can still look at with some sort of, okay, let's wait and see how they do, is the right guard position. Because we still don't know what the rotation is going to look like. We don't know who the quote-unquote starter is going to be. We don't know if they're going to roll out Gerby Lambert first or Sullivan Absher, if they're going to do the half rotations, which Brian and I aren't a big fan of. We don't know if they're going to do, by series, and maybe they replicate what Notre Dame did with Tommy Kramer and Robert Hainsey in 2017. Unfortunately, we just don't know that. And it's so much of an unknown with this offensive line that I just don't think it's as simple as saying, so-and-so should be benched or so-and-so should be fired or this and that. Because look, at the end of the day, if Anthony Knapp doesn't answer the bell, they're going to either put in one of Will Black, who spent most of fall camp at left guard or right guard, mostly left, or they're going to put in Styles Prescott, who is being taught the same things technically that both Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp are being taught. So this is a systemic problem. And if it needs to get fixed, it has to get fixed quickly, because the ceiling of this offense, like we said all offseason, even when we were high on the offensive line, we always talked about it with the caveat in there of, but this offense can't reach its full potential if the offensive line can't protect CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, because we were having these conversations before a starter was named. It's going to be all for naught if they don't handle business up front. And unfortunately, that's just the spot that Notre Dame's offensive line is in, and it's going to be absolutely important, which leads into our final point, Brian. Notre Dame's offense is going to have to find a way to generate big plays in the run and pass game.
Mm-hmm. Last year, they were a big play team in the run game almost every week. Very few exceptions. This year, obviously, we saw the one big run from Jadarian Price. Outside of that, your next biggest run was 14 yards. I mean, I think back to the A&M game last year, Jeremiah Love basically had 2 20-yard runs in the final drive alone and a 19 and a 21-yarder to ice it. You had a play earlier in the game where Jadarian Price runs for, I think, 37 yards. It gets called back. And so they take him out, put Jeremiah Love in, and then he goes outside zone for 29 yards. And then later in the game, Jadarian busts a 47-yard touchdown run. Notre Dame's, they were, I think, sub 50% in run game efficiency in that against A&M last year. Sub 50%, which is not good at all. And yet still won the game. Why? Because they just ripped off some big plays. But the thing that hurt Notre Dame last year as a whole was there wasn't enough big plays in the pass game. Well, we saw a couple of those against Miami. One of them was a busted coverage. So I take that with somewhat of a grain of salt in that you can't assume it's going to happen every week. But there weren't a lot of generated big plays, meaning you went out there and made a big play. You had the great throw and catch from Carr to Malachi Fields. You had the big run by Jadarian Price. Outside of that, it just wasn't there. This is who you are. When you have Jeremiah Love, when you have Jadarian Price, when you have Malachi Fields, when you have Jaden Greathouse, when you have Jordan Faison, you have Eli Raridan, and you've got to make more big plays. And you're going to need some chunk plays. Do they need to have like 5 or 6? No, they don't need like 5 or 6, but they definitely need to be able to make some big plays. And you're going against a defense in Texas A&M that has given up big plays this year. They've already given up in 2 games against Texas San Antonio and Utah State. They've given up 4 plays of 30 yards or more already. So it's an area where they're vulnerable. You've got to take advantage of it. And then there was others, like they had a UTSA had an early 3rd and 10. They popped a draw or popped a little quick counter play and gashed them for 20 yards. Like, you've got to have those opportunities against Texas A&M. You've got to be able to make those plays. You've got to do some things. You can't. This defense is to me good enough to where if you're going to methodically go 10 plus plays and put these long drives together, I don't know that you're going to be able to do that against this defense. You can have a couple of those, but then you're going to need a couple other scoring drives that are set up by the fact that you ripped off a 50-yarder or a 40-yarder or something like that. And so big plays are going to also have to be a part of what they're doing in this game, Trev. I need to see that. It doesn't have to be one, like both in this game. If like they all come in the pass game, A&M's just fully committed to stopping the run, and Notre Dame, hits a 40-yard bomb, from Carr to somebody, and then they hit a little slant route to Jaden Greathouse, and he makes some people miss. He gains 30 yards. And then Jeremiah Love gets a wheel route out of the backfield for 40 yards. And then, they run hit an overthrow to Malachi Fields for a big play or something like that, and over route, okay, fine. That was there in the pass game because they were so committed to the run game. But, if you hit one big play early and A&M backs off and then the rest of them are in your run game, that's fine. As long as it's not, they're only in one side of the ball because you're not playing well on the other side, then I can live with that. But either way, big plays are going to be part of it. Ideally, if you're really cooking, they're going to be run and pass. But as long as they're happening, I'd say at least 3. I think you need at least 3 plays of 30-plus yards in this game to really kind of have the success you're going to have.
No, I agree. The offense is going to have to find a way to be more explosive. Last thing that I'll add, I think one of the ways to do that, to generate more of an explosive offense, is you're going to have to utilize your personnel a little bit differently than what you did in week 1 as well. There were some things walking away that I just don't simply have answers to. And I wish I could give them, but as we both know, if we knew everything, we'd be a lot less stressed when it comes to Saturday night. But I look at what this unit did on offense, and I look at how some of the personnel was used. It's still a question mark to me why you brought in Will Pauling on the goal line and line him up in a bunch formation and ask him to block. I find it hard to believe.
End. Right.
Yep. I find it hard to believe that a tight end isn't able to do that, whether it's Ty Washington or Jack Larson or Justin Fisher or Henry Garrity, or that's going to have to get fixed. I understand that he fumbled and CJ Carr recovered it. But after Jadarian Price had 45 of your 68 yards on your touchdown drive, first touchdown drive of the game, he proceeded to not touch the ball again. There are just some things that I need to understand what gets figured out. And that's just going to be one of the things that happens on Saturday, and we're going to find it out all together. But I think in order for all of those things to happen, I think you have to utilize your personnel in the right way. If you want to generate big plays, if you want to sustain drives on offense, you got to put your players in a position to win. And asking Will Pauling to block Akeem Mesidor on the end is just not the way to have success in the goal line. It just isn't.
I think kind of building on that, I think that's a great point, Trevor. I did not feel like who besides Jordan Faison were you really forcing the ball to against Miami. Now, Jordan Faison's a good football player, but that was puzzling to me. So he plays 50-some snaps. Jaden Greathouse plays 30-some snaps. Will Pauling plays 20-some snaps. Now, yeah, Jordan Faison had some really good plays in the game. But when he wasn't clearly getting the football, he was not playing very hard. Now, maybe he was tired, and those backside dig plays when he didn't think he was going to get the balls, when he was kind of preserving his energy, that's fine. Then play the other guys, rotate more. The fact that you basically almost exclusively played him outside, and then you kept rotating Greathouse and Pauling in the slot was another example of, I don't really love that usage of your personnel in this game. I really don't. I think Jordan Faison's a good football player. Jordan Faison needs to be a 35 to 40 snap guy at the most in this game, because we've seen this from him. He wears down the more he plays. And that was like a bit of a head scratcher to me. There was clearly like no attempt to get Jaden Greathouse involved in the offense at all. There was very little attempt after, to get him. You can say, well, maybe they were trying to get him with that early fumble. Okay, that's cool. So you're going to scrap your game plan because he fumbled the ball. I don't know if that's a smart idea. Then they started to kind of do more things to get Jeremiah Love clearly involved in the offense. And I get that, and that makes sense. But you've got three guys in this game, to me, that you've just got to figure out ways to get going. And it's Jeremiah Love, it's Malachi Fields, and it's Jaden Greathouse. I just think that's a big part of this game. So I want to see those guys where it's more obvious, like, okay, yeah, they're trying to get this guy going. So I think that's a great point, Trevor, is use your talent, use your weapons, have your game plan, and it's not every play. Some plays are like, dude, read the defense. But part of play calling and part of designing a system is, hey, we're going to do some things to make sure that we're going to at least design something that's going to give this guy a good chance to get the ball, or he's the primary read on this play and that play that's going to help your offense get rolling. I think that's an absolute must in a game like this, especially early in the game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, early in the game is going to be key. It goes back to starting fast, and you go back and you look, FanDuel, one of the things that they have going on for Notre Dame is they have them projected to have the lead coming out of the first quarter. And if that holds true and Notre Dame's able to build on that lead, that's going to be something that is going to bode well for them walking off the field with a W.
What are the Love, Fields, and Greathouse ones for this week from FanDuel?
Yeah, so Jeremiah Love, his over-under rushing yards is set at 76.5. And then Jadarian Price's over-under is set at 42.5. That is one that I'm absolutely paying attention to, because as we all know, he could get that on a run. So that's going to be interesting. And then for their pass catchers, Jordan Faison's over-under is set at 37.5. Eli Raridan is set at 44.5. Malachi Fields is set at 40.5. And Jaden Greathouse's over-under is set at 28.5 receiving yards.
If that doesn't go over, there's a problem. There's a problem.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed completely. I'm with you. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show. We're getting ready to talk some Notre Dame defense, keys to victory, what they're going to have to do to have success against the Aggies offense. But before we get there, you know what to do. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And while you're just in the mode of subscribing to different things, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have a bunch of in-season content out. Brian has film breakdowns on the message board of, you have a run game breakdown, right? And a pass game breakdown from Notre Dame's game against Miami. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's we have the upon further reviews, and then we have the statistical breakdowns of both as well.
So make sure that you're checking that out. Champions Lounge at the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 3 of today's show of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, we are talking Notre Dame's defense versus Texas A&M's offense. We have to take a look at this unit and what they have to do in order to do their part in getting a win on Saturday night. First sample size in Chris Ash's debut against Miami wasn't great. And there's a lot of things that they're going to have to get corrected. Now, kind of comes into the bright spot of having a bye week. You have a little bit of extra time to get some things adjusted, figure out what your identity is on defense. But at the end of the day, Brian, when you look at this unit, the first thing that they're going to have to do, honestly, some of it a little bit schematic, but they just have to be more aggressive overall.
Yeah, and this includes so many things, Trevor. It we were talking about this, like it's almost kind of like was really only kind of two really big keys that we really wanted to harp on, and this whole notion of being aggressive be more aggressive is a big part of it. And this is so all encompassing to what they're trying to accomplish. It's be more aggressive in how you play as players. Attack more, fire off the ball, play with more urgency, attack the football more. And yeah, you say, well, some of it's schematic, and it's like you look at a player like a Don Schuler, who is one of the more aggressive players they have, just kind of waiting on a ball, not going to get the ball, just little things like that. And I think that, Drake Bowen, watching him play linebacker, and you're just like, this isn't Drake Bowen. Like, I don't know what this is, but this isn't Drake Bowen. And you start to see enough of that, and you start to realize, okay, I think this is what they're kind of being taught to do. And it's like almost like some of the aggressiveness was coached out of them in preparation for that game. It was so into, thinking man's game and be here and be there and fit off this and fit off that and react to this and react to that it's almost like they just forgot to go play. And that's as much of a coaching thing, if not more so, than it is a player thing, because you're putting them in position. Your job is to basically, it's like, your kids, I don't know if you guys had these, Trev, probably not, but like, yeah, these, you wind the top up and then you let it go. Like when I was a kid, we had these like little motorcycles, and you had like, you put like like this long piece of metal in them, and then you'd pull that metal out and they'd go flying. I had one go flying to the ocean one time. I was like, well, that was stupid. But it's like, it's your job to do that, and then to wind them up and then put them in a position where like, okay, bam, they're going to go. Like a top doesn't just start spinning on its own. If it does, you need to call an exorcist, okay? Because there's something going on in your home. There has to be a catalyst for it to go. And you've got to put players in position to say where their job, their responsibility is to play fast, to play physical, to fly to the football, to be disruptive. And you know what's going to happen when your game plan is not calling for them to do that? They're not going to be fast and physical and disruptive. And so it's going to be up to Chris Ash and his coaching staff to make sure that this game plan is designed towards we've got length, we've got speed, we've got athleticism. Let's frigging use it this week. It's almost like he was coaching like a Notre Dame coach 20 years ago when they didn't have the athletes on defense. Or even, you go back to 2020, I think you could argue that was also true that year. There was a couple elite athletes, but then there was a lot of others like, dude, you're just not quite on the level of an Alabama. It was almost like that, where you thought you had a bunch of smart kids that don't run real well, so you've got to make sure that you're putting them in the best possible situations imaginable, as opposed to, I don't think they can block this guy. And so I'm just going to turn this guy loose and let him go. And we're going to attack them. We're going to go after them. If you try to sit back and let this Texas A&M offensive line just come at you the way you let Miami's offensive line come at you, you're going to get whooped, because I hate to break it to y'all, but Miami's offensive line is not better than Texas A&M's offensive line. You could argue they have a player better than anybody else that the A&M has, but I'm just telling y'all right now, as a whole, that offensive line is not as good, nor is it as big across the board as what you're going to face on Saturday against A&M. Now, I haven't done the actual like calculation for Miami's offensive line, because they have two guys that are like 350, so it might skew things a little bit. But they had a 275-pound left guard starting. They had a 290-pound center starting. Your small guy this week is Chase Basantis, who's like 315. That's your small guy for A&M this week. They average over 320 pounds. And it's just a better, more experienced offensive line than what you face against Miami. That's not meant to be like, Notre Dame fans, get prepared to get whooped again, because I don't think you put your defensive front seven in position to be successful. If you sit back and play this football again this week, A&M will run the ball all over you. They will. You won't be able to defend Marcel Reed. They will run the ball down your throat. And so you've got to come back to saying, hey, no, we're going to be more aggressive. We're going to attack more. We're going to shoot gaps. We're going to be physical. We're going to crash our linebackers more and get back to playing Notre Dame football. I think that includes like smarter coverage structures. Like, hey, zone's fine. It just seems so weird that they were using zone when they should have been using man and using man when they should have been using zone. The whole thing was freaking weird. I really can't explain it to you why they were doing that. I just know that if I'm going to go bunch and we're going to be running mesh concepts, I pray to the football kings that you are going to try to play man with an outside leverage. Like, because you're going to have a hard enough time covering a crossing route, and everything you got to do to cover a crossing route is going to make my pivots wide open, which is exactly what happened. There just was so much that didn't make sense in that game. Fix it. Fix it. It's fine. It's one game. We've all had those as coaches. We've all had games like, well, I thought this was a good idea, and it wasn't. We've all had those as coaches. Fix it and let this team play fast. Let this team be aggressive, and let your talent carry the day. That's what I want to see. That's such the biggest number one, like by far.
Yeah,
by far the biggest number one that I need to see.
Oh, absolutely. And similar to the offensive line conversation, Brian, this is one that will have more carryover than just the keys to victory for this game. We're talking about this defense's identity. Will their athletes be allowed to be turned loose and let go make plays? Because that's when they've been at their best. And so as long as some of those things get fixed in this game, and Brian, I'm sure you're not saying this, and I'm not saying this either, but I'm not expecting a perfect game from this defense either. But at their core, when we sit at the postgame show and we talk about, was this defense turned loose? Were they able to go? But I hope that it is a definitive answer, and I hope that it's yes. I'm with you. But you mentioned the quarterback for Texas A&M, Marcel Reed, and he's kind of their game changer on the offensive side of the ball, one of. And Notre Dame's defense is going to have to do a good job of containing him because end of the day, they're having to game plan for a completely different style of quarterback than what they prepared for in their week one matchup against Carson Beck. Containing Marcel Reed and limiting his big playability is going to be a huge key to victory in this one.
It is, Trev, and there's a couple aspects to this. Number one is you've got to have a smart game plan for him. You have to be aggressive. We talked about that. But there can be a level of aggressiveness that is unsound that will get you gashed by a guy like Marcel Reed. So what does aggressiveness mean? Okay, you're crashing your linebackers downhill. You're trying to get them into gaps, but make sure that the gaps are sound and the gaps are secured. Make sure guys know where to go. Make sure your safety run fits are smart and sound, and let them, make sure that you have all those things covered. Yeah, I want to see the defensive line attack the Texas A&M offensive line, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it. You can't heavy slant all day against Texas A&M. Because if you do, they'll just kind of, if they wash you down and it's a pass play, he could, if you don't get to him, he's going to take off and there's going to be some big rush lanes. So balancing that, like, hey, aggressively attack the run game, get that initial push, but once you rock into the backfield and you see it's pass, like be disciplined. Don't just run. You never like go past the quarterback, right? Especially if you're an inside guy. But defensive ends need to be smart about that too, not going too wide and just letting him step out of the pocket. Be able to say, hey, look, I'm staying here. I'm going to keep pushing this guy back to try to collapse the pocket, but I'm going to stay in a position where I can kind of go off to either gap to make a play on the football. There's things along those lines. There's linebackers being disciplined to once he commits to running, you've got to fly to him and limit those yards. So if it's 3rd and 7 and he takes off running, cool. Tackle him at 4 or 5 yards down the field. Those are things that are going to be important. And from a pocket standpoint, I want to get Marcel Reed out of the pocket laterally, not vertically. Where Marcel Reed is more dangerous is when he can crease the pocket in between the tackles and then he can go vertically. And that's true for most quarterbacks. When he gets out of the pocket, he's working laterally. Now you have a better ability to kind of work with him laterally. And then you obviously have to do a good job of maintaining discipline to where you don't, as soon as he gets outside, you take off running downhill and he throws the ball over your head. So there has to be a level of aggression combined with discipline in this kind of game as well, or a guy like Marcel Reed can all of a sudden turn a 3rd and 11 into a 1st down. Like, hey, you're doing a great job. You had everybody covered. You had everything contained, but you lost some gap integrity up the middle, and he takes off running, and your linebacker over pursues, and he throws it over his head, or he makes a guy miss in space, whatever the case may be. you've got to be able to agree. And I'm not a big linebacker spy guy. I'm not a big fan of that. You've got the speed at linebacker to say, get into your pass drops, be smart about it, but then, go at it. Now, there are things that they could do where if they want to like crash a linebacker up the middle and it stop the run, but it's a pass, and then he wants to kind of sink back, get his hands up for any crossers, and then kind of spy the quarterback. That I can live with that. You'll see that sometimes where linebackers will kind of come downhill and just kind of sit there, and you're like, what's he doing there? He's spying in that instance. He had a run responsibility. It's pass. And so now he's just kind of sitting there making sure they've got all the gaps covered. I mean, there can be a little bit of that, but like I said, I'm not a big fan of the linebacker spies when you have the kind of speed Notre Dame has a linebacker. Get to him, force him outside the pocket, and then be disciplined in how you attack. And I think a big way that you can also do that, Trev, and this goes back to our first point, don't let him get that quick game going all day. Don't play your off coverage where they're hitting the mesh routes and the pivot routes and the bubble screens, and they're just 6 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards. Like, don't let him do that. Make him hold on to the football. Make him throw the ball downfield. He may hit one or two, but the longer he has to hold on to the football, the more chance your pressure has of getting to him and forcing some mistakes. And so if they can do that, I think, not let his legs take over. Because you look at the first two games, Trev, and he only played half of that. I don't remember seeing him at second, third. Did he play at all in the third quarter of Utah State? I don't think he played so. Like maybe a series or something. But like they had, he basically played a half of football. So in 1.5 games this year, he's got 509 yards passing and 105 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns. He's been very good so far. Now Notre Dame's a different animal than what he's faced, but he's a different animal than what they face so far too, because Carson Beck's a much different type of player than Marcel Reed is. So not better, not worse, just different. And he presents some unique challenges for you, and you have to have a plan for him. But the plan can't be so focused on him. This is why I love the spy. You can be so focused on stopping the mobile quarterback that you leave openings in other places. I've seen teams make that mistake with Lamar Jackson. I've seen teams, in college, I've seen teams make that mistake with Jaden Daniels a couple of years ago. I've seen teams make that mistake where they're so focused on a quarterback's running ability that you're playing into his hands saying, okay, you're not rushing me, but you're not really dropping in coverage either. So you're giving me stuff to do with my arm. And I do think Marcel Reed's a good enough of a thrower to say, if you're going to force him to sit in the pocket, but not get to him at all, he'll be able to make some plays on you.
No, absolutely. He's somebody that's going to have to be contained. He's somebody that once he's good at making plays off script. We watched him do that last season. So it's almost one of those, to your point, Brian, if you make him stay in the pocket and be more of a pocket passing quarterback, make him hold on to the ball longer. Notre Dame's defense is going to have to find a way to generate pressure. That goes back to the first point that we were talking about. But if he does have time to drop back into the pocket and sit down and take shots down the field, Notre Dame is going to have to do a good job in two parts, because this is also pass and run game. They're going to have to find a way to limit big plays, and they're also going to have to tackle well. Tackling well is going to be imperative in this game. And again, that bleeds into the first part of you have to let your players go be aggressive. I don't think that it's a coincidence that Drake Bowen had probably his worst tackling performance of his Notre Dame career in a game where he was also asked to sit back and read and react and not play aggressive and not play downhill. He had 5 missed tackles in all of 2024. He had 4 on Sunday night, being asked to play a completely different style of defense. And it was weird because you go back and you pop in the film, and Notre Dame wasn't really missing that many tackles in the open field. They were missing a lot of tackles down inside of the box. And that's something, especially with this offensive line and with this running back room of Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels and the handful of other backs that they use, you're going to have to find a way to tackle better in space or tackle better in the box. And I think that leads to limiting big plays. It's going to be a huge key for Saturday night.
Yeah, it is a big play. It is a big thing, Trev. You nailed the reasons why. My only fear in this game is that your fear of giving up a big play causes you to play soft. And again, we say don't put too much into what coaches say, but here's a comment, for example, from Marcus Freeman today about being physical with the speedy receivers. And he goes, I wish I could say, yeah, that's all we're going to do is try to be physical. But sometimes when you're overly physical with fast guys, they run right by you. So we have to mix up our coverages, mix up our techniques, and keep the ball in front of us. We've got to make sure we don't give up the big play because every one of those guys you mentioned is a home run threat. And we have to make sure we're on body, but also keeping the guys in front of us because we can't let them let a catch turn into an explosive play that turns into points. And so like you hear some things like that and you're just like, and he said it again. He's talked about keeping in front of you also in an earlier question about Marcel Reed. And so you're just kind of like, oh, boy. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. But yes, you can't because what it can be a thing where you stop them, big play, stop them, big play, and all those stops get negated. So yes, you are correct. Big plays are a big part of this game.
Here's to hoping they just don't let Texas A&M's offense just dink and dunk them to death because, like we talked about yesterday, Colin Klein now has the personnel to run the style of offense that he wants to run.
Right.
So,
yeah, and it's one of those things where that was kind of what Al Golden did in year one at Notre Dame. When you look at how they played Notre Dame in Al Golden's first year, I thought they did a lot of that. That's why quarterbacks completed 58.7% of their throws, averaged 6.5 yards per attempt. And then the next year, Notre Dame got more aggressive with how they covered. That drops down to 52.4, and the yards per attempt drops down to 5.5. And then last year, Notre Dame led the nation in lowest completion percentage of 52.1, and the yards per attempt is a 6.0, playing a more aggressive style of play. So we'll see. I mean, yes, you got to mix up your coverages. They can't always know what you're doing, but when I hear that we're going to keep everything in front of us thing, it makes me a little bit nervous. Just makes me a little bit nervous. This is a day after I told people not to put too much into what coaches say at a press conference. But yeah,
I get it though.
It's a little bit like, okay.
I get it. I get it completely. And hopefully the defense is able to rise to the challenge. As of right now, FanDuel has Texas A&M's total points line set at 20, over under 20.5.
Mm-hmm.
So better performance than what they had against Miami, which is promising. But again, it's just one of those that we'll see how the defense performs.
And if they can keep them at that or less, then I think they'll be okay. And look, a lot of this too, Trevor, is if you are keeping things in front of you and they are dinking and dunking, if you're tackling well, you're fine. So, for example, you think of that 3rd and 7 play that Miami converted on their first touchdown of the third quarter. Well, only touchdown in the third quarter. It was the second of their 2 straight touchdowns. And you run a little pivot route. Malachi Tony catches it. I think it was 3rd and 10, actually. 3rd and 8, it was longer than 3rd and 7. Might have been 3rd and 8. And if you tackle him where he catches the ball, it's 4th down. So, like, even if they're more of a keep it in front of you type of thing, and I know you talked earlier about like one of the keys being tackling well, you can still have success there. The problem is you're putting yourself in a situation where you've got to start tackling. When you just let them catch quick game, you now have to tackle them more. Where Al Golden's thing is, let's start forcing incompletions. Because guess what happens when they don't complete a pass? We don't have to tackle anybody. You know what I mean? So you can still be good in that regard. It's just to me, it's harder. Because it's like if I'm an offensive coordinator and I had athletes who can do things after the catch, it's like, look, you may tackle my guy 3, 4, 5, 6 straight times, but that 7th time that you're going to ask, think you're not going to be able to tackle him. He's going to make somebody miss and go do something special. Where if you stop him catching the ball after 3, then like I'd rather you be willing to give up a deep shot that they get 30 yards because your guy made a great throw, great catch, and you protected, than give up 5 straight completions for 6 yards a pop that then covers 30 yards as well. 30 yards as well. So we'll see. We'll see. It does make me a little bit nervous. But again, coach speak. It could just be coach speak. But when he said it twice, I was like, oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
We'll see. We will see on Saturday night, that's for sure. Before we switch over to game predictions and game records, Brian, we also wanted to touch on special teams because Texas A&M does have an explosive return unit as well. And I know the whole mantra of do no harm kind of keys to victory for special teams. But who was it? You said it was Casey Concepcion had a big punt return in the first game, and then Mario Craver he also had a big return that got called back by a penalty in, I believe, their game against Utah State. But this is a dynamic and explosive return group for Texas A&M. Special teams is going to have to do their job and play sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it's Loose Emoji's old motto of do no harm. That's what Loose Emoji used to always say when it came to special teams is do no harm. You can't have like a muffed punt that gives them a short field. You can't fumble your opening kickoff like you did against Louisville last year. You can't give up a big return. I mean, look at how big some of those things turned games last year in one direction or another. I mean, you think of the Louisville game and how that muffed punt that they had changed the course of that game to a degree. Wasn't that the touchdown that made it 21-7? I believe.
The muff punt.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, those are big things. And so you look at the Georgia game and Notre Dame's up 13-3 and they start the second half of the ball and you go off and rip off a long kick return. And now all of a sudden they're playing catch up the whole game. You shank a punt and they give them the great field position. You get a punt blocked. I mean, think of the Brian Mason era when blocked punts were major game changers. You just can't allow that to happen against you. Now, if it happens for you, that's great. And I'm always a big fan of when your special teams makes big plays. I don't think they need that to win. They certainly help. But the big thing for me and my focus is like, listen, let's just play clean football on special teams. If you do that, you should be okay. You should be okay.
Agreed. Play clean, play smart, do no harm. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Love that special teams motto.
Yep.
Really do.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
It's catch, kick, cover.
Yeah.
Now
here's the one bright side, Brian. The special teams unit for Notre Dame in their home opener was the only unit on every phase of the game that played the cleanest game. So,
let's knock on wood a little bit here and make sure that continues.
Yeah.
That's.
I'm with you. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for part 3 of today's show. But don't go anywhere. We're getting into the fun part. We are coming up with game predictions and game wreckers for the Notre Dame Texas A&M matchup. But before we get there, make sure that you guys hit that like button. There's 354 people watching us live right now, so make sure that you guys hit that like button at some point throughout the show. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel as well as the CFB Nation channel. Talked about it earlier, but Vince and I are going live again tonight for the 4th edition of the Spread Option at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about the different games that's going on this weekend. We'll be talking Georgia, Tennessee. We'll be talking Clemson, Georgia Tech. And then, of course, we're going to be talking Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Live tonight at 8 p.m. Make sure that notification bell is hit for both of those channels. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, let's get into some game predictions and game wreckers here in part 4 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. And this segment, what we like to do, we're going to give our score prediction, and then we're going to talk about how we see this game playing out. And then we're going to wrap that up with talking about some game wreckers, people who we think are just going to kind of take over this game and have a big moment on Saturday night. And this is the part that I always love talking about, man. I love talking game predictions. This
yeah, this is the fun part of the week, right? Like, so all week we break down the matchups, we break down the game, we talk about this thing and that thing, and at the end of the day, we make our predictions, and this is the fun part. This is kind of how I think the game might go, should go. In the past, I've always done predictions on how I think it should go. This year, I'm going to be a little bit just combining the two, but this is kind of the thing that you have for fun. And then when you do occasionally nail it, you're like, yeah, I got that one right. But more often than not, like, our scores are not spot on. And as I've said a million times, if I could nail the predictions of every single game, I'd be a very wealthy man and would probably be doing something different in my life. So I'd definitely be living in a different house, because after the third flood situation, I'd be like, screw it, we're out of here. I've got the money to go buy a new house, but I don't. So we're stuck here for now. So, but no, this is the fun part, Trev, and we enjoy doing this. But I also will say that when I give a prediction, it's what I think should happen. I mean, it's genuinely what I believe. If I think Notre Dame's going to get beat by 14, I'm not going to be like, Notre Dame by 20. Just, you'll kind of know. But at the end of the day, this is a game that Notre Dame should win. They're the better football team, Trev. It's just about what version of Notre Dame are we going to get, because it's still so early in the season that we don't really know who this team is. And that's always what makes predictions this early in the season challenging. But we're going to do them anyway and have some fun with it. So, Trev, I'll let you start, tell me what your score prediction is and how you see the game playing out.
Yeah, man, this you could not have been more accurate. This was a very, very tough prediction to come up with. And I think Bobby O'Shea actually beat me to it in the chat. My final score prediction for this one, I have Notre Dame 34, Texas A&M 24. Similar to last season, I think this game is going to be closer than what the final score will indicate. I think Notre Dame is going to pull away late. I think some things are going to start clicking. And with that being said, you brought up a good point. It's early, and both of it, we just don't really know a lot about Notre Dame. Played one game, lost by 3 points on the road to the number 10 team in the country. With Texas A&M, they're 2-0, but they beat UTSA and Utah State. So it's just one of those where the gap of talent between who each team has played is just vastly different. So then I had to look at this and break down what we do know. What we do know about Notre Dame is they have the makings of a good pass offense. We saw that. The makings of. They're not a finished product by any means. But we saw some promising things on August 31st. They lost on the road to the number 10 team in the country by 3 points and only put together one scoring drive the entire first half. Jeremiah Love only touched the ball 5 times in that half. And I don't think that that's a repeatable performance. If it is, we have much bigger issues at hand than, what the final score prediction is for Notre Dame. But then I also look at the offensive tackles and the performance that they had. And I also don't think that that's repeatable. I really don't, especially from Emil Wagner. I don't see a scenario where at the end of the game, if Notre Dame has to put together a game-winning drive, he's not actively trying to box out Cassius Howell like he's a defender going up for a rebound in a basketball game. I just don't see that happening. When I look at this, I think it comes down to defense. And if they're allowed to play free, and I'm hoping that they are, I think they'll look like what we're used to seeing in Notre Dame defense being. How I see this playing out, I could see it being a tie game midway through the third quarter, like a 21-21 type deal, and I think Notre Dame starts to pull away. I think they get a turnover that really changes the tide of this game. I think they then go on to win it 34-24.
Trev, I kind of have 2 predictions in this game, by the way. So number one is my prediction of kind of how I'm concerned about how the game is going to play out. Like, I have a feeling that, like, I'll say this, okay? Put it this way. When it comes to the defensive coordinator, because I don't know a lot about him yet, and we only have one set of data, that I can only go off of what I've seen. And so until we see otherwise, and with Marcus Freeman's comments on Monday and then today, there's no evidence that they're going to change. For all I know, they're just going to be like, hey, let's just clean up some things and still continue this shift to more of a zone-oriented team, which makes our recruiting strategy very puzzling. But let's just, I got to work with that. And in that instance, I think A&M will move the ball and score on Notre Dame. I think A&M is going to run the ball on Notre Dame. I think they're going to be able to complete some passes on Notre Dame if they play a similar game plan to last week. But I also think that Notre Dame's offense is going to be better than it was last week as well. I don't see a second straight bad game from the offensive line. They have gone against this defense before. I think last game was a very poor performance. I don't think it's a normal performance. We've never seen Anthony Knapp that bad. We've never seen Emil Wagner anywhere close to that bad. I think they'll perform better. I think CJ Carr's got experience under his belt. I do think that Jeremiah Love's going to come out with something to prove in this game. And so I do think, even though I'm concerned about the defense giving up yards and points, I do think the Notre Dame offense is up to the challenge. So my final score is 31-27 of kind of how I think it's going to play out based on what we've seen. I think the defense is going to look a lot like it did last week, but the difference in score, as I said, 27 points, is that I do think the offense will be up to the challenge this week. Whether they start fast or if it's in the second half, that I don't know. But I do think that the offense is going to be prepared. And I think there's some advantages that if the offensive line can handle business, that they're going to be able to throw the ball in certain situations, and I think they'll be able to establish a running game against Texas A&M as well. So as long as the offensive line plays good football, there were a lot of missed opportunities early against A&M last year that Notre Dame didn't get that allowed them to kind of keep that score down a little bit. I think this year they take advantage of some of those opportunities, and they are able to move the ball. But I do see it being a very competitive game. It's not like it's going to be 31-20 and A&M scores last, because then they would go for 2 and it'd be 31-26. So it's not going to be that kind of thing. I do think that Notre Dame is going to win the game, but I do think it's going to be a very competitive game. That's how I think it will go. Now, I'll say this. If we see Chris Ash come out and this defense is kind of back to playing what it should be playing, which is a more aggressive style, again, not unsound, not blitzing 8 guys, but just coming up, being more physical against the receivers, throwing off the timing of the pass game, being aggressive up front, not let A&M get that run game going downhill. If they do that, then I see this game being 31-20. Like that's not my official prediction. My official prediction is 31-7. But I could see a 31-20, 31-17 type of game if the defense comes out and plays the way it's capable of. I do think this is still a very talented defense. This is also a talented offense. But if the offense plays the way that I think it will, I do think they'll put A&M behind the 8 ball a little bit. Then if your defense plays aggressively, you can then maybe force some mistakes that allows you to kind of pull away a little bit in this one. So that's kind of my what should happen, but what will happen, 31-27 Notre Dame wins. That's what I think will happen, because until Chris Ash shows me that he knows how to utilize his talent, I'm in wait and see mode. And all I got to go on is he doesn't know how to use it. And like I said, I've got no evidence because we don't get to go to practice. I got no evidence because of what Marcus Freeman said doesn't lead me to believe that there is going to be a change. Hopefully there will be. It's just a lot of that's coach speak. And as we said yesterday, he's not going to tell us if they're going to change that. Hey, you know what? We're going to go back to playing the way we did last. He's not going to tell us that, nor should he tell us that. I don't want him to tell A&M that. But until we see it, we're going to have to, kind of, this is what we know about him.
To your point, Brian, about we'd all be pretty wealthy individuals if we knew what the final score was going to be. FanDuel gives you the opportunity to guess what the final score is for these games. And I did some numbers for you. So for your final score prediction of 31-27, if you bet $10 and you were to get that right, your payout would be $1,500. For my score prediction of 34-24, if I bet $10 and got it right, I'd win $1,250.
So does that mean my score prediction is more bold?
Yep.
Or like less likely?
Likely, not bold, but
less likely.
But then how it should play out of 31-20. If you bet $10, you'd win $1,750.
Okay, so they see a close game.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The spread is FanDuel still. Is it still a touchdown?
6.5. Yep.
6.5. Okay,
so
they're down a half.
Yeah, their prediction for the game is basically 28-21. Because Texas A&M's points are set at over under 20.5, and they think Notre Dame's going to win by a touchdown.
Interesting. What's Notre Dame's point set at?
Their points are set at, give me just a second, I'll have that pulled up for you. Notre Dame's total points are set at 28.5.
Okay. So it's close. I mean, it could be 29-21, 28-21. Yeah. Interesting.
That's
very
good.
Interesting.
Man, if only we could look into this crystal ball that people think that you have, and we could see what these final scores are, we'd be living pretty large. But
at the end of the day, Trev, with this prediction though, the key for Notre Dame is to win the game. Even if everything doesn't get fixed in week 3, the key is to get the win. And then you can live to fight another day, and you've got another week to clean stuff up and get right and figure stuff out. So yeah, it'd be nice if Notre Dame came out and fixed everything in one bye week, and they came out and the defense looked like a vintage Al Golden defense, and CJ Carr looked like, a grizzled veteran, and the offensive line looked like the Joe Morrow Award winners and all that stuff in a week. That'd be nice. At the end of the day, you need to get the win. You need to get the win, and then we can figure out, okay, what else needs to be adjusted and fixed and cleaned up. But if you can get a win over a top 20 team at home, in front of a ton of great recruits and a crowd that's just anxious to see you perform well, then you're gonna be fine. You'll be able to figure some stuff out.
I think that's so well said. It kind of reminds me of the spot that this team was at against Louisville last year when they were hosting a top 20 opponent. And this team on offense, defense, and special teams looked nowhere near a finished product and didn't look like the same team that played Georgia and played Indiana in the playoffs. But it's win. Handle your business. And then a lot of the things will start to fall into place. So I'm with you. I'm with you completely. But if we do think that Notre Dame is going to win, Brian, which we both do, they're going to need some people to step up in this one. And we're going to need to talk about some game wreckers. And so I'll go ahead and get us kicked off. And I know we do one on offense and one on defense.
Yeah, you can do at least one on offense and defense. You can, if you got a couple, you can do a couple.
Okay.
I'm going to give 3 actually, just to give you a heads up and be prepared if you want to think of a couple others.
Yeah.
So there's like the one primary and then 2 others is basically how I want to do it.
Yeah, I broke down on offense. I broke down one that it kind of has to, and then one that it would be kind of like a nice to have. So the first one, when I look at this game, and I know this is going to sound pretty easy to some, but first game wrecker is Jeremiah Love. He was your game wrecker last year. In games like this, in ranked matchups, primetime, night games, I say it all the time. Brian says it all the time. You need your dudes to be dudes. And Notre Dame doesn't have more of a dude on their roster than Jeremiah Love. He's somebody that had 10 carries for 33 yards against Miami. And again, like I said in my prediction, I just don't think that performance is repeatable. I don't see him only having 5 total touches in the first half. I just don't. And so when he's given his opportunity, he's going to have to put himself in a position to be successful. The offensive line is going to have to handle their business up front. But Jeremiah Love is a player that has the ability to take games over. And I think that he's going to have to be that level of a game wrecker this week. I bounce back and forth between a couple of others that have to. But when I look at this, 4 is going to have to be the guy that we all have seen him be. Because there have been times, and there's reasons for it, but more times than not in big games, Jeremiah Love has had lackluster performances. Last season in the postseason, it was due to an injury. But now this is his time, compounded with the performance against Miami, to say, hey, no, I am the best running back in college football. Here's why. So that's my first game wrecker on offense, Brian. Did you want to ping this back and forth, or did you want to?
Yep. I have Jeremiah Love as one of my secondary ones because it's for the reasons you talked about. You nailed that. He's your best player. But my number one game wrecker has to be CJ Carr. And it's similar to the question I got asked yesterday, is if you could guarantee that one guy plays well, who would it be? And to me, it's got to be CJ Carr because of the fact of everything you just said. I know that Jeremiah Love has to be your dude. You know that Jeremiah Love has to be the dude. Texas A&M knows that Jeremiah Love has to be the dude. And I have a feeling that Texas A&M thinks that they're going to come out and really force feed the ball to Jeremiah Love early in the game. And it wouldn't surprise me if Notre Dame does that. So if they know that, you then have to then protect him. Because if you can't protect him, then guess what? He's going to get shut down because they're going to just have too many people for you to block. He may have a run here and there, but he's going to have a hard time really getting going because they're going to do everything they can to shut Jeremiah Love down and keep him from taking over. You don't think they watch the last year's game and watch Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price take this game over? They're going to say, hey, if you're going to beat us, CJ Carr is going to have to beat us. And you know what CJ Carr has to say? Bet. And then go out there and do it. And, be poised like he was in the first game. Eliminate some of the mistakes. Some mistakes result in turnovers. Some mistakes result in not getting the ball where it needs to go to, run game and pass game. He's got to make good RPO decisions. He's got to make good pre-snap reads. He's got to make good pre-snap reads. He's got to be willing to throw the ball down the field. My fear is that because you don't want him to throw it down the field all the time, that you kind of beat that out of him. Don't want that to happen. So I want to see them be willing to be aggressive with CJ, not play this conservative, let's just get one more point than the other team, as opposed to, hey, let's go be the best version of ourselves. That's what I want to see. And they're going to need CJ Carr to play good football in this game. I don't think CJ has to go out there and, go 21 of 28 for 295 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm simply saying he's got to make some plays in this game, when, especially early. And if they're going to put their resources to stopping Jeremiah Love, then the guy that can most make them pay for that is CJ Carr by getting the ball where it needs to go. So he's my number one, Trev. And then my number 2 is Jeremiah Love. So you talked about him. I think you nailed all the reasons why he needs to be there. So who is your number 2?
My number 2, I'm actually going along the offensive line, and I'm going with right tackle Emil Wagner. Here's why. When I go back and I look at the offensive line performance against Miami, there are some things that I saw from Anthony Knapp that were out of character. But was I surprised that he struggled in pass protection once again? No, I was not surprised.
Sad.
I know. But Emil Wagner's performance in the rush game and in pass protection was shocking. You're a redshirt junior. You are the only offensive lineman that has 16 career starts. You were the only offensive lineman that started all 16 games last season, started, played, and finished in all 16 games last season. And you're a captain this year. Him having a performance where he comes back and says, hey, last week was the anomaly. Last week was a bad week. And it's one of those where it's going to have to be a show me. And I can hear Marcus Freeman talk about it in press conferences about how he, loves the leadership and they're doing all the right or they're saying all the right things. But you have to come out and handle business. And honestly, not just handle business, but you kind of have to do it in a resounding way. You're a captain and people look up to the way that you play. I think if Notre Dame is going to have to take a step forward this game, they're going to have somebody in the trenches step up and say, hey, game's on the line. We have to put a drive together. Follow me. Run behind me. Call plays where I can go out and show you why I am who I am, because I understand the point that he was trying to make, but there is a level of production that goes with being a captain. And you cannot have the performance that Emil Wagner had against Miami and expect it to not go unnoticed just because you're a vocal leader on the sidelines. And so my second one is Emil Wagner. I think that he's one of those that I hope to, but he's another one of those guys where I put him also in the bucket of you kind of have to have that eye-opening performance of, hey, I'm still me. And that's what I'm hoping to see from 59 on Saturday.
It's got to be I had a bad game moment, not I'm having issues with this or I'm having issues with that, or there's some other bigger reason, like you've raised some potential concerns. If he comes out there and plays great against Texas A&M, then like, okay, he just had a bad game. The heat got to him, the whatever, the this, the that, the other. He's fine, but it's not because he put on too much weight or he, lost this or he's not locked into this or whatever. It's just, dude, he had a bad game and he bounces back. It happens to everybody. So yeah, I think it's good. My number 3 is Malachi Fields. Now you could insert Jaden Greathouse into this conversation as well. And you could even say maybe it's the both of them, but I think it's more of they need one of them to really make an impact. And when I think of the things that I want to see from this offense, hitting the back shoulders, hitting the deep shots, hitting some backside digs, things along those lines, Malachi is really the guy that I think fits in well to that. Now, if Jaden Greathouse is the guy they want to build the pass game plan around, I'm totally fine with that. Totally fine with that because he's a dude as well. I'm just saying specifically about this game plan, one or both of these guys need to be game wreckers. And if it's both of them, then this game won't be close. Like it won't be close at all. And a lot of mine is built around the pass game because I truly believe if they can protect the pass game, the run game will go off. Because you don't have Riley Leonard's legs to protect the running backs this year like you did last year. You're going to need your throwing game to protect it. And both work great, but you need to make sure that you're doing it. So that's why Malachi is my number 3 choice. But you could easily just say, what about Greathouse? Cool. Like I'd love for both of them. But if it's one or the other, I think those are the 2 biggest game wreckers they have at receiver. And you'd like for one of those 2, if not both, to really go off in this game on offense. Who's your third?
Mine were just those 2 guys because one more. I'll give you one more.
Come on, man. Give me one more.
I'll give you one more. Is it really a keys to prediction show where we talk about the offense and players who could go off?
I knew you were going to go there.
If I didn't talk about the Notre Dame tight end, but Eli Raridon, he is somebody that, in all seriousness, he had a rough first game in certain ways. He had 3 drops. It's rough. First game is tight end 1 at Notre Dame. He also had 5 receptions for 97 yards. And I'm sticking consistent with what I've said all offseason. He is a mismatch nightmare. They were probably going to line up one of Scooby Williams, who's a 6'2" linebacker on him, or one of their like 5'11" to 6'1" safeties on him, because they rotate their safeties quite a bit. Eli Raridon is a factor in the red zone that will have to be utilized, I believe, in run game and pass game this weekend. I do not want to see Will Pauling trying to edge seal Cassius Howell. If I do, I'm going to lose my mind. That is a role for number 9. That is, or honestly, a role for number 7 or 85 or 42 or
75. I mean,
or
seriously, put Sullivan Absher in
literally,
the game as your number 6 offensive lineman. Seriously.
literally.
Who are you trying to fool at the 3? Like, seriously.
Seriously.
Who are you trying to fool at the 3-yard line? Come on, man.
But I do think that Eli Raridon has the opportunity to be an X factor in this game. I don't think it's a mystery that FanDuel has him as Notre Dame's leading receiver potentially. His line is set at the highest at 44.5 for receiving yards. He's going to have to pick up where he's at from a run blocking perspective, carry that over, and he's going to have to play more consistent because we talked about it in the offseason, Brian. I firmly believe that Malachi Fields is going to have a better game. And he didn't have a bad game against Miami. He had a bad play, but then after that, he kind of turned into what we thought that he could be. You get both 9 and 0 going in this game. Texas A&M doesn't have the athletes to cover both of them. And that's not a knock on Texas A&M. Eli Raridon is just a 6'7", 252-pound tight end. Malachi Fields is a 6'4", 222-pound boundary receiver. Get both of them rolling. They're going to be in a really, really good spot.
Absolutely. I love it. I knew that's where you're going to go, but I was like, come on, man. But it's also, I mean, yeah, you love tight ends, but like, there's a reason why you specifically talk about this tight end so much. He's the one player in the pass game. It was very obvious, along with Jordan Faison, that they were trying to force feed the ball to last game. And I'm fine with that. Fine with that. Yep. I'm fine with that. So defensively, Trev, who is your number 1 game wrecker for the defense?
I'm going on the defensive line and I'm looking to the interior. And I'm going with Jason Onye. He's somebody that I think has to be. We heard all fall camp about how 47 is unblockable. And I know what people say, well, Notre Dame's offensive line didn't perform that good. I mean, the interior of the offensive line,
yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
They were the one facet of the offensive line that did play well against Miami. You need Jason, especially with this type of opponent, with this big of an interior. You're going up against one of Mark Naboo, who's like 330. You're going up against Armaj Reed-Adams, who's a consensus preseason All-American. And then you're also could be lined up against Chase Basantis. This is one where Brian talked about it in Keys to Victory and containing Marcel Reed. You have to be disciplined with him stepping up into the pocket and making plays, not breaking contained to the outside, but vertically. Jason Onye is somebody who could have the opportunity to single-handedly shut that down. But he has to raise his level of play. He does. And I don't want to paint this picture that he was garbage against Miami, because he wasn't.
Right.
He had a bad first couple series. That was also the first series that he played on defense since Louisville last season.
Right.
But he is somebody that, because of what it would mean in this specific matchup, I have Jason Onye being my number 1 game wrecker on defense.
That's a good one. I had him as my number 3 game wrecker in this game. I kind of went back to front in this particular game, but that's not a bad one at all, obviously, because I have Jason on there as well. What's interesting is he actually played pretty decently against Texas A&M last year early on, but then he started to kind of really heat up over the next month before he was kind of out. So I'm with you on that. I think Onye's one, but my number 1 is Adon Schuler. And I think Adon is going to have a bounce back game. I think Adon is a guy that's going to look at that play and it's going to eat him up. That play where he could have made that play at the end, it's going to eat him up. And I think he's going to come into this game and really have something to prove. Now, listen, you have to be careful. You don't try too hard to go make a play, and then you end up making a mistake or being out of control or getting up a big play. But I think Adon's experienced enough to not do too much of that. I think he's going to be a guy that, kind of like last year, he's going to make some plays coming down in coverage and step in front of a ball or light up a receiver that somebody else picks it up. I think he's going to come down and be effective in the run game. I think some of those plays over the middle, the receivers get laid out by Adon, and maybe they don't want to stick their hands out as far for that ball the next time. I think Adon is a guy that I see as being a potential game wrecker. That's what I see in this game. I have a feeling he's going to bounce back and have a really big day. And you could pick anybody. You could pick Christian Gray, you could pick Leonard Moore, you could pick Tay Johnson. I got a feeling Tay Johnson might be a factor in this game. You could pick Devontae. I mean, they're all going to be important, but I just have a feeling that Adon Schuler is going to have a really bounce back performance from what he saw in the opener, if they let him. And I think you know what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm. I love that pick. I do. Next guy on defense, I worked front to back, and my next guy is Drake Bowen. He's coming off of a rough performance, and I think he would probably be the first person to tell you that. He's the leader of the defense, and he's somebody that's going to have to get them going collectively. He had a press conference, and it was just during one of their media sessions over fall camp. And he was asked a question about playing with intensity and bringing the energy on defense. And he said that he loves to be the leader of that because he thinks that it's infectious. And this defense is a defense that plays with a certain level of intensity. And you got to see that. And I do think that barring them having the ability to be turned loose, it's the first home game at night. You need 34 to bring the juice in all phases. You know, whether and could it be a highlight reel big hit like or a nice hit like he had against IU on that screenplay? That was nice. The one where he blew up and absolutely shut it down at the. Could it be something like that? Oh yeah, and believe me, I would love to see something like that. But even if it's just as simple as your captain duties of getting everybody fired up on the sideline and making sure that everybody's lined up where they need to be, and that's going to be so crucial for Drake Bowen in this game. And his leadership and all the things that we praised him for, of his evolution from Texas A&M last year to Ohio State in the national championship game, it's being tested in game number 2 for this defense, and he's going to have to bring it. So my number 2 guy is Drake Bowen.
I love the fact that you could read my lips there.
I got you.
That's my number 2 as well. I think Drake. I'll take a little bit further. I think it needs to be the leadership, but it also needs to be him coming down and just wrecking the run game.
Yeah.
And being allowed to wreck the run game. I'm going to say the same thing about him that I'm going to say about a Don Schuler. You got to allow him to wreck the run, not be your cleanup artist, football stuff. It's allow him to wreck the run game. And I want to see him coming flying downhill and playing aggressively. So I was a Don, Drake, Onye. You were Onye. Who was your Drake, and then who's your third?
My third is going to be insert whoever is going to be playing nickel corner. I'm going back-to-back weeks of talking about the nickel corner position. Last week, it was in my unsung heroes, which, Brian, just to give you a heads up, I am going to ask you about that again, of who you think could be an unsung hero this game on offense and defense. But last week, I talked about Devontae Smith being the unsung hero of this game. Now, unfortunately, they lost, but my prediction wasn't too far off because he didn't miss a single tackle. He played 36 snaps, and he only allowed 1 reception for 7 yards. I think this game, and when I say just insert whoever, because I do believe that Carson Hobbs is going to rotate in. Look, at the end of the day, he's a young player, and he was playing in his first meaningful snaps, and he did have a rough game. He did. I think that if I don't know him, but if from what I've heard, from what I've seen, he's a competitor, like most of the players on Notre Dame's team, if not all. He's going to want to have something to say about his performance from the Miami game. And they're going to be tested. You're going to be going up against one of Casey Concepcion, Terry Bussey, or Mario Craver, because Colin Klein does a good job of moving his receivers around. He is somebody, the nickel position is going to have to play a really good game, coming up in run support, also helping contain Marcel Reed, and not letting him make plays in the open field, and, of course, covering the slot receiver because Malachi Tony put in yeoman's work against Notre Dame slot corners in the season opener. And I think that whoever lines up in that position is going to have a good game for Notre Dame Saturday night. One of the reasons why I didn't go, because it was either nickel corner or Don Schuler, because I'm with you, along the same lines of a bounce-back performance, barring that they're allowed to be set free. But then when I look at, I'm confident that Christian Gray and Leonard Moore are going to have good performances. I am. But that nickel corner position is one that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. So that's going to be my third game record, Brian.
I'm with it. So we were one guy off from having the same 3, but we kind of were on the same, like I said, front to front. You went front to back. I went back to front. So we got it all covered. Those are the predicted game records for this game.
Like I did last week, Brian, a little bit of a curveball, maybe not so much of a curveball now because you might know that it's coming. But if you could pick an unsung hero, one that maybe that we didn't talk about in Keys to Victory or in our prediction or in the game records, but who's somebody on offense and defense that you think step up that we could be talking about in the post-game show afterwards?
Well, one of mine was going to be, you kind of already got to it in your game records. It's the tackles. If Notre Dame wins this game and plays the way that I think it's going to play, we're going to look back and say, okay, at least for a week, they got Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner to play better. Or if they play somebody else there. I think that's going to be sort of the unsung hero. The skill players we're going to see, we're going to recognize the plays they're making. This guy made this run. This guy made that run. If it's going to be a skill player that's an unsung hero, it's going to be Jadarian Price because he's always the unsung hero when he has a big game. It's always get love the ball, get love the ball, get love the ball. And people should say that because he's their best player. But they always kind of like, it's like at the expense of Jadarian. How about we get them both the ball and then let Jadarian go make some plays? He's the only skill guy that I see as being a potentially unsung hero on offense. Defensively, Trev, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a Josh Burnham, a Junior Tuilamaka, a Jared Dawson, somebody that doesn't get talked about a lot, making a couple big plays in this game that are just changing him. I would have gone with Devontae Smith, but you already used him as a game wrecker because I think he's going to have a very important role this week covering slots. A very important role. Very important role. So he'd be mine, but you already kind of had him as a game wrecker, so that's why I went somewhere else. How about you? What say you?
No, I get you. On offense, mine also lives along the offensive line. I'm going to go with a right guard because there are some – I think the bad performance of the tackles kind of overshadowed the fact that it was also an up-and-down game for whichever right guard that they put in there. I think that we're going to start to see some separation between who should start to see the bulk of the reps. And I'm not going to make a prediction as to who because I do think it could go either way. But I think this Texas A&M game, one of Gerby, Lambert, or Sullivan Absher are going to kind of emerge ahead in this race and kind of say, hey, we can start to put some of the rotation questions to rest. Because I think there was a lot of good that we saw from both Sully and Gerby. And I think that they're going to take that next step in this game. I do. And this is a good time to do it when the lights are the brightest. So that is my unsung hero on offense. On defense, you brought it up. It's one of the edge rushers between in the run game specifically, a Josh Burnham, a Junior Tuilamaka, a Bryce Young. I think this could be a game where he puts together more of a complete performance and starts to hone in there a little bit. So that's where I would go with unsung hero on defense.
I dig it.
Love it.
Hey, before we go on to, we're going to do some predictions of some big games today. I just want to remind people, our guy Jason Smith in the chat. Jason is a veteran, and his pup was injured and he got hit by a car last week. So his pup's name is Jinx. Jinx has been very, very much there for Jason through a lot of stuff, dealing with a lot of things that our veterans deal with because, again, they do things that we don't. And so he is trying to do a GoFundMe to help pay the expenses. Fortunately, Jinx survived being hit by a car, but there's a lot of medical expenses that Jason and his family have to incur to do that. And so he started a GoFundMe, or someone started a GoFundMe for him. I put the link in the chat. I'm going to put it in there again. If you guys are able to, let's help our guy out. And so I donated. I was fortunate to be in a position where I could donate. If you're not in a position to donate, send them your support, send them your prayers. Those things matter too. If you are in a position to donate, please do, and let's help our guy out. He's almost halfway to his goal. So if you can, and like I said, if you're able, there's no shame in not being in a position to do that. We're all in different circumstances, and I've been in situations where I wouldn't have been able to help either, except to offer support and prayer. But if you are, let's help our guy out. I just put the link in there. You can go to my Twitter page. There's a link to it. I put the GoFundMe link in there, but it's too big for the thing, so it sent it over to the next one. So I just went ahead and put my tweet in there. But check that out. Try to help our guy out. One thing I love about this community is the times we've stepped up when people are in need. Recently, we had someone who was about to get evicted from his home, and he sent me the form and said, hey, can y'all help me out? Is it okay if I put a GoFundMe on the board? I did, and he went double beyond what he needed to keep us home. So the ability of our community to step up and help out others in need is truly amazing, and I don't ever take it for granted, and it is always appreciative. And so I know I'm coming back again and asking you guys again to help out, but it is for someone who has been a member of our community from, I don't know if he's one of the OGs, but he's very close to the OG period that he's been with us. And as I said, you all know, any chance we get to help out our veterans, I'm down. So if you guys can make some time to help out Jason, like I said, I just put that link in the chat. I donated on behalf of Irish Breakdown. I would appreciate it. Anyone that's also able to do that to help him out as well. And let's get him to his goals. So I just wanted to get that out there before we move on to the predictions for the game. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the notification bell, share this podcast, make sure you're signed up to our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's always the best way to support what we're doing here at IB. And also make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel tonight, 8 o'clock. Trev, Vince going to go live to do the latest edition 4, as Trev pointed out, of the Spread Option podcast.
All right, Brian, getting into the next part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. We're talking about big picture college football, and there are some games this weekend that caught our attention. There are, and I'm really excited to start breaking them down and talking about them. And the first one that we're going to talk about here is actually in the noon window. We are going to be talking about we actually talked about this before the show started, but we're going to be talking about the Clemson at Georgia Tech matchup. Number 12 Clemson travels to Georgia Tech. That is a noon p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ESPN. As of right now, Clemson is favored by 3.5 points on FanDuel, and the over-under is set at 51.5 points. This is a really, really interesting matchup here, Brian. Clemson won their last meeting in 2023, 42-21. That also coincidentally was the week after they beat Notre Dame 31-23. But that was the last time that these two teams met. And you look at this matchup, though, Brian, this is an interesting one. This is a really interesting game to talk about.
It is a game that's a little bigger maybe than it's being discussed, in my opinion. And maybe that's just because some people don't care about the ACC. But I think this is a potentially big game because there were high expectations for Clemson coming into the season. And boy, they're going to be a playoff team. I've seen people like national pundits have them in the title game. I saw one predicted them to win it all. I've seen multiple predictions of them beating Notre Dame in like round 2 of the playoffs. As you know, Notre Dame has to play in round 1. They get a bye, and then they beat Notre Dame. And then they come out against LSU and were very unimpressive. The defense was good. It wasn't great. The offense looked like same old Clemson. And then you're like, okay, they're going to bounce back against Troy. And they're down 16-0 before they finally woke up and ended up winning that game 27-16. So, you know, you're going into your third game against Georgia Tech on the road, and you haven't looked all that good. And so it's like, okay, is it just early season? They're not playing great. They've got to do better, this, that, and the other. Or is it they're just not who we thought they were? And so now you're going up against a Georgia Tech or a Georgia Tech team who, you know, had a nice road win over Colorado. But if you watch that game, it was super sloppy. I think they had turnovers on each of their first 3 possessions. And fortunately for them, Colorado's not good enough to take advantage of it. You do that to Clemson, you're going to get run out of the building. But, you know, they obviously came out in their second game, dominated against, you know, Gardner-Webb, a little, you know, so I'm very curious to kind of see how this game goes. And, you know, we didn't see Haynes King play against Gardner-Webb. So, you know, again, he kind of reading some updates now. It looks like he's still he's going to be available, but he's banged up. Shocker if you watch the first game. How do you think this guy's going to make it through an entire season? You know, but that's just the reality. They're going to need him to play and play well. The good news is for them is Aaron Philo, every time he stepped onto the field, has played pretty good football and did so against Gardner-Webb. But this is a big game for Clemson because they've got to show, no, we're still the big dogs in this league. And, yeah, we got off to a slow start, but we're fine. You lose this game, Trevor, and you're in literally you've got to win out to really have a shot. Like, technically not, because if they win out in the conference and then lose to South Carolina, it's just kind of like it was last year. They got to win out, in my opinion, to get back to being a team that people respect. If they win out the rest of the ACC and then lose to South Carolina again, people are going to say, yeah, you're not real. You're the best team in a bad league, and, you know, you're not that good of a team. But all of a sudden, though, that schedule for Clemson's looking a little bit maybe different, Trevor, than it was coming into the season, because you've now got to play Florida State and Louisville back-to-back weeks in November, and Florida State especially has looked pretty darn good so far. You've got to play at Boston College. That Dylan Lonergan is going to be a whole different dude to defend than what we thought maybe he was before the season started. They played, by the way, in my opinion, the best game of the weekend this past weekend. The Michigan State Boston College game was, in my opinion, the most entertaining game of the weekend. Yep. And then this is a chance for Georgia Tech to say, you're no longer the big dogs in the league. This is now open for business, and we're one of those teams to be a potential contender. So I think this game has got a lot more riding on it than just somebody's catching their first conference loss. I really do. I could be overstating it, but I really think that's what's at stake here. Clemson falls to 1-2. I think this team falls apart a little bit. I really do.
No, I view that game the exact same way. I mean, Georgia Tech is going into what, year 3 of Brent Key, and they're trying to establish themselves as a dominant power. How do you do that? Well, one, you need to make sure that you don't need your quarterback to carry the ball 19 times to win on the road by 7. That would probably be a good start. Now, the good news for them is they have the people to help them support. Jamal Haynes and Malachi Hosley are a good backfield, really good backfield. I love Jamal Haynes. But you got to find a way to get Malik Rutherford going. Got to find a way to get him involved in the offense more than what they are. The good news is they're going up against a team in Clemson that's reeling. You beat Troy 27-16. You needed a 17-point third quarter to do so at home. It's not great. You play Georgia Tech on the road. Their offensive and defensive lines continue to struggle establishing the line of scrimmage despite the talent and the experience. And it's one of those where when I look at this Clemson team, it's like, okay, if you can't do it in this game, I don't have the confidence that you're just going to figure it out when you play Florida State. You know, and so that's what is on the line for Clemson here. But, you know, when I go through and I look at this, if Georgia Tech wants to win this game, you can't carry the ball 19 times. Good news is they did rush for 320 yards against Colorado on the road. And then they passed for 457 yards and rushed for 223, albeit against Gardner-Webb, but 680 total yards of offense with your starting quarterback out is definitely impressive. Also good news for Georgia Tech. Good news / bad news. They don't know if Haynes King will be 100%, but he is available. But Aaron Philo will have to come in and play at times. And that's exactly how they beat Miami last year in 2024, which is also injured. That is exactly that they had. Basically, they had Haynes King.
Didn't Haynes King go 6 of 6 in that game, throwing the ball? That's it?
Yep. 6 of 6. But then I think he rushed for like 100 yards. Now, I think like one of those was like a 70-yard carry. But they basically had Haynes King come in and run the ball, and they had Aaron Philo throw it. And I think he went something like, 5 of 8 for like 60 yards and a touchdown or something. But this is one, and we're having
talking about
fun.
Against Gardner?
No, against Miami last year. Yeah.
He was good.
Yep. So I know we're having a little bit of fun with the show today here, Brian, but look, I'm going to take Georgia Tech in the upset here. I do. I think Clemson's reeling. I do. And I think they're going to struggle, I think, to shut down Georgia Tech's run game, because as of right now, I'm just not sold despite all of the household names that they have on their offensive and defensive line. I just think they're going to struggle establishing the line of scrimmage against a Georgia Tech team who, in my opinion, will be the best rushing team that they will have faced so far this year.
What's your score?
My final score prediction is 24-21. Georgia Tech with the upset at home.
So close. I literally just wrote it down, Trev. 24-20. So we're close. I have Georgia Tech winning 24-20. I have not liked at all what I've seen from Clemson. There's been some players I've liked. Ronan Hannafin is a dude in that Clemson defense. Like, he is a dude. But just their D-line doesn't dominate like we expected, or like we thought they might. Their offenses look stagnant. Their offensive line is just kind of like it was last year. The only thing that gives me pause is that I do worry about, is this offense the same without Haynes King? I do worry about that a little bit. I also worry a little bit about, like you said, they're defensively, they don't have the athletes on the back end that LSU did to give their receivers problems, and we'll see Antonio Williams this weekend. So I'm a little nervous picking Georgia Tech just because I don't want to bet against Dabo, and every time I do, he tends to like make me look bad. But I just looking at the breakdown, I like this Georgia Tech team. I think that they can hang with Clemson in the trenches, and they've got athletes on offense that can give Clemson problems. So that's kind of where I'm at for this game. And I think it'll be a tough, grinded out football game. But at the end of the day, I'm going with the home team to win in an upset 24-20.
It's definitely going to be a fun one to watch. That is for sure. But getting into our second game here, Brian, Georgia Tech and Clemson aren't the only ones kicking off conference play. Georgia will travel down to Knoxville and play Tennessee Saturday at 3:30 p.m. You can watch that game on ABC. Right now on FanDuel, Georgia is favored by 4.5 points. The over-under is set at 49.5. This, another really interesting matchup, Brian, and I know that you wanted to talk some Bulldogs Volunteers football. This is going to be a fun one.
This is a huge game, Trev. Like, the SEC right now is wide open because we've seen, one conference game so far? That was Ole Miss going on the road and beat Kentucky. Have there been any other in-league games? I don't believe that there has. So you've had a lot of teams looking good so far to start the season. LSU had one of the biggest wins of the season so far, going on the road, beating Clemson. And then you've got, obviously, Ole Miss had a big win at Kentucky last weekend. You had Georgia's 2-0, although I haven't played anybody. You had Tennessee with two convincing victories, including one over Syracuse on a neutral field. Obviously Texas A&M started 2-0. They haven't really played anybody, but there's a lot of teams in the SEC looking good. Mississippi State just beat Arizona State this past weekend in a big win. So, Arkansas's 2-0. It's been a good start to the season for the SEC. And there's no one that I look at, I'm like, oh my gosh, that team is wow, that's the best team in the country. But there's a lot of really good teams so far. And one of the least impressive teams so far, in my opinion, the SEC has been Georgia. If Georgia played a Florida State in the first two games like Alabama did, they're 1-1. I mean, they didn't even get to 30 points last week against Austin Peay, Trev. That's not good. And so if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm like, this team better wake up in a hurry, because they scored 45 points in the opener against Marshall. And if you watch the game, it wasn't an impressive 45 points. It wasn't like they just came out offensively and lit the world on fire and just looked great and all those kind of things. They were solid, but they just haven't been impressive. Their numbers are good. They've ran for over 200 yards. They've thrown for over 200 yards, but it's just kind of some hollow yards. Now, part of it is they're working out some new players. It could be that they got a brand new receiving core. Their offensive line is kind of, coming together, and they've all played a bunch, but not like this. This is really Gunnar Stockton's first chance to become the guy at Georgia. Last year he was just kind of filling in a postseason game. They haven't looked great, to be honest with you. On the other side of the ball, or other side of the field, Tennessee's looked pretty flipping good so far. Now, obviously, last week you beat East Tennessee State 72-17. Well, it's an FCS team. Yeah, so was Austin Peay. So, I mean, it's not like this is a team that you look at and say, well, they're pretty terrible. Austin Peay was not only an FCS team, but they're an FCS team that went 4-8 the year before. So they're not even that good of an FCS team. At least they weren't last year. East Tennessee State's not very good either, but they went out and looked like what a SEC team is supposed to look like against an FCS team. And let me point out that East Tennessee State went 5-7 or 7-5 the year before and only lost to North Dakota State by 3 points. So that's a good football team at the FCS level, and they destroyed them. And then, of course, had a very impressive win over Syracuse. Having said that, neither of those two teams are on Tennessee's level talent-wise. So now you got to face a team that's kind of been the team that's punked you lately. They've got a couple wins over Bama recently. Tennessee's not afraid of Alabama. They're not. They've had some good wins over some other good teams in recent years, but they have not done well against Georgia. And this is their chance, in my opinion. This is your best chance, in my opinion, to really say, hey, we are a legitimate SEC power. We are that team. And, they've beaten Georgia. They haven't beaten Georgia since 2016. Georgia beat them last year by 14 points in a game that was 17-17 at one point in time. And then Georgia just bullied them in the second half of that game, just straight bullied them in the second half of that game. And then, of course, in 2023, they got blown out by Georgia 38 or 38-10. And in 2022, you thought they had a shot to beat them. It was in Athens, but that was that Hendon Hooker team, and their offense was scoring 50 points a game, and they looked like gangbusters and world beaters, and then Georgia just humbles them in that game. This is your chance. This is your chance to say, hey, we're on that level. We've beat Alabama recently. We beat this team recently, but we haven't beat Georgia, that old traditional SEC East rival. And this is the best chance to get Georgia, in my opinion. They're very talented in the front seven. They're pretty physical. I actually been relatively impressed with their front seven so far against not very good teams, but their offense is very stagnant. But I could also see Georgia winning this game 17-13 because Tennessee can't get anything going. So it's going to be fascinating because I don't know that we really know a lot about either one of these teams based on who they've played. But I test Tennessee's been the far more impressive team. But the question is, Trev, can they keep that going now against Georgia? Like some teams just have a mental block. Everything on paper should say Tennessee should beat Georgia, but then you just get out on the field and you're like, nope, which is what I felt a couple years ago. I just felt that wasn't a great Georgia secondary. You know, that Tennessee team had tons of speed, and you just felt like this is the year that they just got embarrassed. But they got to get over that Georgia hump. Like I said, it's been almost a decade since they beat Georgia. And this isn't a team that they don't play very often, Trev. They played in 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So they've played every year. This isn't like, we played them in 16, but because they're in this, we don't play them that often, and we've only played them twice since then. No, you play them every single year, including the COVID year, and they've beat you every single year since 2016. They've got you right now. You got to flip that script. Can they do it? I think they're certainly capable of it, Trevor, but this is one of those things. Josh Heupel's got to show that we can go toe-to-toe with a physical team and beat them. We can play up-tempo and knock off Alabama, two teams trying to score, but can you play a team that wants to punch you in the mouth and go win that game? We're going to find that out.
Oh, we sure are. This is such an intriguing matchup, Brian, because you said it best. I just don't know if we have a good gauge of who these teams are, because I'm with you. Georgia didn't impress in the last couple weeks. But then, you also start thinking about Georgia in like 2023. It's like they didn't impress me the first couple weeks either. Like, I know the final score looked good against Ball State, but you watch that game, it's like, dude, how did Georgia get outrushed by Ball State at home in Athens? You know what I mean? It's like, what are we doing here? But then we also know that Georgia went on to go undefeated in the regular season and then lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game, which ultimately held them out of the playoffs. I think the matchup that is going to be the most intriguing
and beat Tennessee by 28 that year.
Yeah. And so the most intriguing matchup, because as a team, we don't know what this is going to look like. The most intriguing matchup will be Georgia's defense versus this Tennessee offense. Georgia's offense has not impressed me. I know you're breaking in, Gunnar Stockton is going to be this guy. You're figuring out if Mike Bobo's really going to be the offensive coordinator of the future. I don't think that he is. But you go and look at Georgia's defense. They held Marshall to 207 total yards. They held Marshall to 3 of 15 on third down. And then they held Austin Peay in what was truly an ugly game, which if you just look at the numbers, it doesn't look like it. I mean, Georgia outgained Austin Peay 421 to 196. Held them to 3 of 13 on third down. Georgia went 7 of 13 on third down. The fact that they only scored a touchdown a quarter is really weird. And then on the flip side, you have Tennessee's offense. Yep. Yeah. Yep. And then on the flip side, you have Tennessee's offense. It's been humming. Put up 493 total yards of offense against Syracuse. You put up 734 total yards of offense against East Tennessee State. That's going to be a matchup to watch. I just can't say with any confidence what either of these teams are. I was very impressed with Tennessee's win over Syracuse, especially how it looked. But then you go watch Syracuse have to play UConn in overtime to win. And so
we won 9 games last year, by the way. Don't hate on Jim Mora. He's doing some things at UConn, baby.
That's fair. No, that's totally fair. But, it doesn't give you it doesn't give me, I'll say, a good gauge of who these teams actually are. And so when I predicted this game, it came down to 2 things. 1, Georgia's defense versus Tennessee's offense. And 2, it also came down to Kirby Smart versus Josh Heupel. And like you said, some coaches just have trouble with other. I mean, it's crazy to think Marcus Freeman is 0-3 against Ryan Day in the last 3 years. Sometimes you just have that coach or you have that team that it's hard to get over that hump. So I say this not with a lot of conviction, but I do have Georgia winning this game on the road 24-20. I think that Tennessee is going to be able to move the ball well. This is going to be the first. This is the biggest game of Joey Aguilar's career. And what he's shown us so far is that he's been able to handle the moment of being an SEC quarterback, but he's yet to play an SEC team. I don't think that he does poorly. I don't think that he is the reason why they lose, but I'm still going to roll with Kirby Smart and Georgia's defense until in this matchup specifically it gets proven otherwise. And so I have Georgia winning a close one on the road.
So Trevor is not a Joey Aguilar believer yet. I get it.
Not
that's ultimately that. I joke with you. You've been kind of on the I'm not sure about Joey Aguilar from the beginning. I've been much higher on Joey Aguilar, but this is a different test, to your point. Now, he's played Power 5 teams before. He's played North Carolina. He's played Clemson. They played Clemson last year, and he went 18-41. He didn't have Tennessee's players around him. But you have to be able to look at it and say, until he shows he can play in an SEC game with SEC teams and all the environment and the pressure that goes with it, because there's no pressure if you're playing at App State and you're playing Clemson. Nobody expects you to win that game. Just give it your best shot, But this is the kind of game where, people expect you to win this football game. And, but the other thing is what's impressed me about Tennessee this year, and again, you have to consider the competition so far, but they have run the ball very effectively so far this season. And Joey Aguilar has been part of that, but he hasn't been necessarily the driver of it. They had that one long run in the opener, but, Star Thomas went 12 for 92 against Syracuse. Sean Bishop went 11 for 82. Peyton Lewis went 8 for 38. And then, like I said, Joey Aguilar had that 25-yard scramble. And then you look at the East Tennessee State game, Star Thomas, 12 for 69. Sean Bishop, 3 for 68. You had Peyton Lewis went 8 for 19 in a touchdown. You had Dwayne Morris went 9 for 48. They've won well over 200 yards each of their first two games. And Joey Aguilar's throwing the football. So I think both offenses have looked good so far. Both defenses have been pretty good so far. But I just feel like Tennessee's the team that just plays with a little bit more, tempo, a little bit more, energy so far. I think that it could just be Georgia's just kind of going through the motions until they get to the Tennessee game, perhaps. I mean, we've seen that from Kirby's teams before, which you kind of alluded to, Trevor, because a week after they struggled early against Ball State, they only beat South Carolina 24-14, and that wasn't a very good South Carolina team. So, and then they go out there and play somebody good and smack them in the mouth. So I am, you know what, Trev, I shouldn't do this just because I should have learned my lesson by now. But I'm actually going to go Tennessee in this game.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I've got Tennessee winning 20-13. I'm not a believer. I have more faith still in Joey Aguilar than I do the Georgia offensive line and the Georgia secondary. I'm still not a believer in those units yet. And Georgia's ran the ball well so far, but they haven't exactly been, world beaters. Against Marshall and Austin Peay, they're running for over 200 yards a game. They're averaging 214.5 yards per game. They're only averaging 5.1 yards per carry. They went for 4.8 yards per carry against Austin Peay. Had 190 yards, but they needed 40 carries to do it. That just didn't really blow me away, to be completely honest with you. And, so I just feel like they're eventually going to have to win, and I think this is their best opportunity to win. And I like Tennessee in this game. I do. I have it 20-13. I could see it being a little bit more high scoring than that, but I just kind of see this being an early season. There'll be some turnovers by both teams, and it'll be a physical team. Both defenses are going to play hard. I'm just going to go Tennessee 20-13, and they're going to make me look stupid again. I know it. I know it, but I can't go away from what the film tells me and what the matchups tell me. The matchups tell me, watching film, that Tennessee is, I think, a team that gives Georgia a tougher matchup this year. It is at home, and I think they get the win. But history tells me that I'm going to once again look stupid for picking Tennessee to beat Georgia, but I like the matchup for them. I like the matchup.
Back-to-back upset predictions from Brian Driscoll. I love it. I love it. Can we go for 3, ladies and gentlemen? Because the third game that we're going to be talking about, the Florida Gators traveling down to Baton Rouge and playing LSU on the road. That game kicks off at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. LSU is favored by 7.5 points. The over-under is set at 47.5. Another SEC matchup, Brian, a league that's set up to be extremely competitive this year. How are you feeling about the Gators and the Tigers?
I think the thing here is more about the storyline of, if you're Billy Napier, you need this. You desperately need this football game because you just had a loss that could potentially like ruin your like chances of building this team up. Because you got to go on the road at LSU, and then next week you got to go to Miami, and then the next week after that, they have a bye week. Then the next game is home against Texas, and then their next game is at Texas A&M. And then now that home game against Mississippi State's not looking so great right now. Then they got to play Georgia and Jacksonville. Then they got to play at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, and then you end the season at home against Tennessee and home against Florida State. Every single team left on their schedule can beat them. Now, they can beat a lot of those teams too. How does this team respond to what happened to them last week? And that's kind of the bigger storyline for me. And I think if you're LSU, this has got to be like they haven't exactly lit the world on fire the first couple games either. I mean, like that win over at Clemson doesn't look quite as good now after watching Clemson kind of struggle with Troy. You beat Louisiana Tech 23-7. Your offense is literally scoring 20 points a game right now through 2 games, but their defense has only given up 17 points. And that's a very positive sign so far for LSU. So it's just one of those things, Trev, where look, man, how good are either one of these teams? I don't know that we really know the answer to that yet. And you look and say, well, LSU's done great on defense, but Clemson's offense has been mediocre. And then Louisiana Tech, who they held to 7 points, Louisiana Tech only scored 24 points in the opener and only had 262 yards of offense against Southeastern Louisiana, an FCS team. So, like, they're not very good. So it's just, we don't know who these teams are yet. Florida's defense has played very good football so far. But once again, a silly mistake hurts Florida in a big moment. Once again, the lack of just creativity from Billy Napier offensively did Florida in. And I don't know how that changes in this matchup, but the point is they are going to need this upset. They're going to need it to salvage their season, because we talked about last year, if they lose this particular game, they could be in trouble. It could snowball. And what they did was that they rallied last year. You lost that game at home to A&M, and we're thinking this is it. But you had a Mississippi State team that wasn't good and a UCF team that wasn't very good to kind of salvage your season, get some wins back on track. You don't have that now, Trev. There is no Mississippi State and UCF right there in your early season schedule. You literally have one of the worst stretches of any team in college football at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas, at Texas A&M over the next month. Like that's not good. It could get ugly in Gainesville. And how long does this team stay together? So if you aren't able to pull off an upset here, or at least go toe to toe with LSU for 4 quarters, it could get ugly down in Florida, man. It could.
They have 10 games left, and 8 of those teams are ranked. I mean, that's so brutal.
8 of those teams are ranked for now. Yeah. I mean, like I'm looking at a couple of these teams that aren't ranked, and I'm like, Mississippi State's got Alcorn State, Northern Illinois before they play Tennessee on the 27th at home. Like, they might be ranked by the time they play Florida. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I mean, I'm with you, man. I don't know who either of these teams are. I do think, and before I give what my final score prediction is, I do think this is going to be a low-scoring game. LSU's offense hasn't put up the points it's capable of through the first couple weeks. Now, I get it. Game plan for Clemson, you're on the road. It's week 1. Sure, you had a touchdown. You even had a touchdown overturned that I still don't – I'm with you. I don't really understand how that got overturned. It is what it is. And then, you follow that up with, the dreaded hangover game against Louisiana Tech. I mean, maybe. But when you just watch this offense, it doesn't look as impressive as what I thought it would. Florida, on the flip side of the coin, is once again at the brink of falling apart at the bare minimum. Bare minimum, you can't get blown out. Yet this has to be a competitive game. By all accounts, Billy Napier has to get the Gators ready. But look, at the end of the day, I think this just comes down to simple execution, and I think Florida has been significantly the sloppier team. Mm-hmm. They only converted 4 of their 12 first downs or third downs against USF. They were penalized 11 times for 103 yards at home, and I don't see that getting cleaned up against LSU on the road. I just don't. And so I have LSU winning a close, low-scoring game, 21-17, because another factor in this, and he doesn't use his legs a lot. I know DJ Lagway does his best work from the pocket, but if there was ever a game and ever a team to show off your athleticism against, has LSU's defense finally figured out how to contain and stop athletic quarterbacks? I guess that's another thing that we're going to find out. And so that could be the unsung part of this game. Who knows?
Was the first one, right? I mean, that was kind of the first good defensive game they've had against a mobile quarterback, but he's not your traditional, like he's not the same kind of mobile like a Marcel Reed is. It's a different kind of mobile.
Yep. Agreed.
How you can be a team that returns as much as Florida returns and be as undisciplined as what Florida is beyond me. I think South Florida, having watched them, is a much better football team than we thought they were going to be. Alex Golesh is doing a phenomenal job. They whooped Boise State in the opener, whooped them. And then they went and beat Florida on the road. Like, this is clearly a good South Florida football team, but I don't care how good South Florida is. You're Florida. You shouldn't be able to struggle at home against them. They couldn't run the football against them. DJ Lagway is still a young quarterback who's very inconsistent. I've been saying it for a while. He's very talented, but they're putting too much on that kid. And he's not a super accurate player just yet. He's going to need some time to develop. But if he doesn't play like Superman, they don't win games like this. And that's way too much to put on a kid like him, meaning young and still developing his game. So I don't have a lot of hope for Florida in this game. I've got LSU winning 27-13. I do think Florida's got a very scrappy defense. So I don't think LSU hasn't lit the world on fire. So barring just a bunch of bad turnovers that give LSU short fields or give them points, I don't think LSU's offense has been overly impressive either. Their line's just kind of okay. Their receiving core is good. They can't really run the ball yet. So they've got some things they got to figure out, Trev. I mean, they're literally averaging right now 20 points a game through 2 games, and one of those games is against Louisiana Tech. And offensively, they've got to find some answers, man, and they've got to find some answers in a hurry. But I don't know that this is a game that's going to necessarily kill them. Look, they ran for 108 yards in the opener against Clemson, 128 yards against Louisiana Tech. That's not good. They've been sub 3.8 yards per carry in both of their first 2 games. They're not doing a tremendous job of protecting the quarterback so far. Garrett Nussmeier's only thrown for 469 yards in the first 2 games, and it's not like they're only playing him half the game because they're blowing people out. That's concerning for me. They're eventually going to figure it out. Their line's going to get better and better the more games they play. This is a big game for LSU because you're in a good place right now because, yes, you're developing all those things that I talked about that LSU still needs work on. They're doing that while undefeated in one of the big, if not the biggest win of the season so far. You could argue. Now, I would say Miami's win over Notre Dame is the biggest win of the season so far. I think you could argue, however, that the LSU win over Clemson is the biggest win of the season. And the reason I say those is because I think Florida State beating Alabama is maybe the biggest upset, but I think Notre Dame and Clemson were arguably better teams than Alabama coming into the season. Arguably. Certainly Notre Dame was. So I think LSU going on the road and winning that game is huge. When you're working out kinks, you want to keep winning while you work out the kinks, and then when it hits, you're in a good position. Is this the week the offense hits? This is going to be a tough test. This is going to be the best defense arguably the best defense you've played so far, based on how teams are playing. Clemson, again, hasn't impressed me so far. So I think this is a big game for LSU. And the one caveat I have is I think Florida's front could cause some problems for LSU that could lead to Garrett Nussmeier having one of those Garrett Nussmeier games where he just turns the ball over a bunch. That's Florida's hope. If they can't get to Garrett Nussmeier, they have no chance of winning this game. I have LSU winning 27-13. I don't have any faith in Florida's offense, and I don't know that their defense is going to be able to get enough pressure on Garrett Nussmeier to really stop him. But if I'm wrong about this prediction, it'll be that matchup right there. The front puts a lot of pressure on Garrett Nussmeier. LSU still can't run the ball. They have to throw it a bunch. They pressure him. He turns it over a few times, and then Florida's able to pull off the upset by capitalizing on those turnovers. That's the only hope Florida has. I just don't think they're going to be able to do it enough in this game. And because I don't think they can score enough. I could see LSU scoring 17 points and winning this game. That's how little faith I have in the Florida offense right now.
We see that the exact same. I'm with you. I'm with you completely. Before we get out of here, Brian, I know there are some other games that we're keeping our eye on for this weekend. And one of them is we're sticking along the Florida train here, and we're staying down south. USF, who's now ranked number 18 in the country, travels to play Miami in Hard Rock Stadium. That's going to be a fun matchup too.
It is. I'm looking forward to that game, Trev. We're not doing predictions for some of these games coming up, but that's a game I'm keeping an eye on. Is Miami as good as people think they are now that they beat Notre Dame? Is USF as good as people think they are? If Miami's as good as people think they are, they're going to win this game. But if South Florida's as good as people think they are, and they were impressive, I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think it'll be a competitive game. But this is the kind of game where a undisciplined Miami team sees South Florida, they're not, we already beat Notre Dame, and they overlook them and they get upset. But, if they come in and play with the same kind of fire they did against Notre Dame, we'll see. And this is a game that's going to tell us, are the Miami fans actually finally bought in on this team completely, or are they still the front runners only show up for the big games? Because this is a good South Florida team, Trev. So I'm very much looking forward to this game. It's going to be very intriguing, going to tell us a lot about both of these football teams. And I was surprised, Trev. I know you guys are going to talk about it more tonight, but I really was surprised by that 17.5 point spread in this game. I don't know what the FanDuel spread is, but I know that what's the FanDuel spread of that game?
17.5.
Yeah. Oh boy. There's another game that I'm very intrigued by. A couple SEC games, because we are kicking into conference play this week. Arkansas at Ole Miss, and then Vandy at South Carolina. Arkansas has looked really good so far. And Ole Miss had a really gritty win over Kentucky last week. I don't think Kentucky's very good. And so how good are they? And then, of course, Vandy looked great the first couple games. And they have a common opponent. And Virginia and South Carolina struggled a little bit with Virginia Tech. Vandy did for a while, but when they got to the fourth quarter, Vandy ran it down Virginia Tech's throat. This is a big, big game for Vanderbilt. If they go on the road and beat a ranked SEC opponent, that's the kind of statement win that Clark Lee needs in year 2 to say that the Bama game last year was not a fluke. You get another one like this, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, here we go. What are some others you're looking at, Trev?
Yeah, no, I'll give them to you in a second. But one interesting thing about that Vanderbilt game, the over-under on FanDuel for Lenora Sellers rushing yards is 50.5. And in his first 2 games, he didn't reach 30. And to your point about the common opponent, I think what's interesting is when they played Virginia Tech, he was under 25 yards, rushed for 25 yards.
And a lot of that came on the first drive of the game, or first or second drive of the game. He had that long run. That's all he did running the football in that game.
Yep. And they're going up against the Vanderbilt defense that held Kyron Drones, the quarterback for Virginia Tech, to 36 rushing yards. And so I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. I agree with the USF Miami one. Another one, and of course it's kind of one of those old-fashioned rivalries, but it's that Pittsburgh at West Virginia, that backyard brawl. I think that's going to be a fun one to watch, man. I mean, Pitt was a team that I was high on coming into this season because I like a lot of what they brought back. And this is going to be kind of their first real test of the season. Can Eli Holstein continue to take that next step? That's going to be interesting to watch. You go through and you pull up their schedule. They haven't played level competition to West Virginia, especially not on the road. They opened up their season at home against Duquesne. They won 61-9. They beat Central Michigan at home 45-7. But again, it's one of those where the offense is looking pretty decent.
Yeah.
I mean, Eli Holstein's, he's completing 70% of his passes. He has 8 touchdown passes, and then Desmond Reed is doing Desmond Reed stuff. So, to the surprise of not a lot of people. And then the receiving core is starting to impress as well. And then Rich Rod at West Virginia, can he pull off an upset? That's going to be another interesting factor to this game because, you go and you look at what West Virginia has done. They beat Robert Morris 45-3, but then they had a loss on the road to the Ohio Bobcats 17-10.
That was bad.
That was
They
rough.
picked off Parker Navarro 3 times and still lost. Now, I think Ohio's a good football team. I mean, Ohio took Rutgers down to the wire. They had plenty of chances to upset Rutgers on the road too. So, I mean, that's a good football team. The Bobcats are a legitimately good football team, but that's still, dude, that's not good. Not, that wasn't good. They played at Ohio. That was a weird one. They went
Yeah.
to played a MAC team on the road. Yeah, that's an interesting game, Trev, and obviously one that Notre Dame fans will keep an eye on. You want Pitt to keep winning, give them a good win. I'm also going to be moderately paying attention to the USC Purdue game, just because I think Purdue's looked pretty good their first 2 games. They've already matched their win total from last season. They're 2-0 right now, and they've been impressive in both games. Now they've played teams that aren't very good in both games. They beat Ball State in the opener 31-0, beat Southern Illinois last week 34-17. Got ripped up a little bit early, gave up a couple touchdowns early, and on 2 75-yard drives, but settled in and were more impressive. Not that I think Purdue's going to win, but can Purdue at least make this a competitive game, or are we going to quickly realize that this is the same old Purdue? That they finally play a team with a pulse and they get annihilated. And obviously USC is interesting, Trev, because they have destroyed their first 2 opponents, but neither of them are very good either. They played Missouri State, who's not very good, and then they beat Georgia Southern 59-20. This is the same team that lost to Fresno State 42-14 in the first week. So they haven't played anybody either. So how good are these 2 teams really? We'll kind of get a sense of it in this game, in my opinion.
Last game that I'm keeping my eye on, and it's just because they're both on Notre Dame's schedule. I'm not looking at it to be a competitive game because, spoiler alert, it won't be. But Boston College travels out west to play Stanford.
Yeah.
I am curious to see how many points Boston College will score in this game. Yeah. Because Stanford is, good night. They're averaging, holy cow, through 2 games, they have yet to throw a passing touchdown. They're averaging 2.9 yards a carry on offense. Their leading receiver on the team has 5 catches for 68 yards. And they're going up against an offense in Boston College that so far this season has put up 66 points against Fordham and 40 points in double overtime against Michigan State in East Lansing. That one could get ugly out in Stanford.
I also want to see how BC responds to that tough loss last week.
Yeah.
You had that tough loss at Michigan State. You're going on the road again all the way out to California. We're going to see whether, what kind of character this BC team has, because that was a good loss.
Yeah.
Now, they won't say that because no team wants to say a loss is good, but we learned a little something about that BC team. Yes, their defense is not great, but we already knew that. But we also learned that offense is legit at BC. It is legit. And so I'm curious to see how they handle that. They need a nice bounce back win. And Stanford, like you said, Trev, is awful. I think the decision to not go with one of the younger quarterbacks and keep starting a 6-year senior who's awful is such a mind-numbingly poor decision that I just how bad is Elijah Brown that he can't play on that team? Seriously. What is Ben Gulbranson doing for you right now? Nothing. He's awful, Trevor. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm really not trying to be a jerk. I'm not one of those just ripping players. But Trev, he's completed 51.6% of his passes. He's averaging 4 yards per attempt. They've played Hawaii and BYU so far. 4 yards of attempt, and the BYU game raised him up to 4. He's thrown 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. He's only passed for 251 yards in 2 games. And again, he's I believe a 6th-year senior. So what are we doing here?
Yeah,
what are you doing here? He doesn't make you more competitive. I think it's simply he's a veteran, smart kid, and so they can run this really expansive NFL offense. Well, guess what? That expansive NFL offense is getting you destroyed by people offensively. It is not good. They're I don't know that they're going to win a game.
I think as crazy as it, I don't think the final scores will look as bad as they did from last year, but Stanford, especially on offense, might be worse than what Purdue was last year. Yeah. And because at least Purdue took Illinois to a 50-49 ball game, I think on the road or something. It's just, it's rough. When your starting quarterback has a QBR of 11, how bad do you think Elijah Brown is to not play him? Because it literally begs the question of how worse can it get?
Exactly. It can't.
It
can't. I just don't see how it can. I don't see how it can. It's so bad. Yeah, that's going to get ugly. There's 2 other games that I got my eye on, Trev, just real quick. Tulane I'm curious, what's the FanDuel spread for this one?
Let me get that.
Because I've seen others that have Tulane favored in this game against Duke.
Got to get that pulled up real quick.
The interesting thing is, like, there's two group of five, coaches right now that I think are on the verge of potentially becoming hot commodities. One we already talked about with Alex Golesh, who had that big one over Florida, what they're doing at South Florida. The other one is John Sumrall, who's at Tulane, who has obviously done a good job so far there. And I pointed out last week that I was keeping my eye on Tulane potentially being a team that could upset or even whoop Northwestern, and they did. And then Duke went on the road or at home, got beat convincingly by Illinois. There's also some storylines. Did you find the line? What is it?
Tulane's favored by 1.5 points.
Okay. I love that. And the storyline of Darian Mensah was the quarterback at Tulane last year, took a big payout to go to Duke. He comes back to Tulane. There's going to be some dudes that are going to be like, if I get a shot to put a lick on my former teammate who left for greener pastures, I'm going to do so. It's a big game for John Sumrall to kind of get this kind of win as him and Alex Golesh kind of battle to become those next big name guys with SEC ties that are looking to be that young up and coming coach with that next chance to become the next Kurt Signetti or the next guy like that's gone from an FCS team to an FBS team and won at a high level. So I've got my eye on that game. And then the other one is a 10:30 game, Minnesota at Cal. Now, Minnesota, I thought so far has been okay. They didn't play great in the opener, but they battled and beat Buffalo, and then they went out last week against Northwestern State, beat them 66-0. Drake Lindsey, the quarterback, I talked about this offseason, went 8 of 39 for 139 yards, basically played like a half. They went 13 of 17, ran all over Northwestern State, who's just not good. So you don't know how much you learned about them. And then on the flip side of that is you've got Cal, who is surprisingly 2-0 to start the season. Cal loses all those players, and they went on the road and dominated Oregon State. Like, they really took it to Oregon State, jumped on them 14-0, ended up winning 34-15. They had Malik Murphy yelling at his coaches on the sideline. Their true freshman quarterback, whose name I will not even remotely try to pronounce because I don't want to do it, just do a disservice. He's a true freshman who had signed with Oregon and then didn't like it, left. He committed to Cal, flipped late to Oregon, transferred from Oregon after the spring was over. He went 20 of 30 for 234 yards and 3 touchdowns in the opening win over Oregon State, also rushed for 30 yards. And then in his second start against Texas Southern, went 27 of 38 for 267 yards and had a rushing touchdown. So this is an intriguing game because it's like, is Cal legitimately good or is this Oregon State that bad? And is Minnesota legit? So I think that's another interesting game, Trev, that I have on my radar for this weekend of we're going to learn a little something about these teams because I'm shocked that honestly that Cal's 2-0, not a little shocked that they're 2-0. We've come to realize Fresno or Oregon State's not very good. They went out and got beat by Fresno State the next week, but it's not that they're just 2-0, but they've looked good jumping out to a 2-0 lead or 2-0 start. So that's another game that I definitely have my eye on, Trev.
No, I love that. I love that completely. Last thing that I'll say, going back to the Boston College at Stanford game, Boston College is only 14-point favorites.
Yeah, I'll be shocked if that game's that close.
You and me both.
Shocked. Did you watch Boston College last week?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing Boston College can do is move the ball and score.
Yep.
One thing I saw something that this was the first game that then I saw the stat that Jonathan Smith's teams Michigan State has never outscored an opponent in the second half under Jonathan Smith. I think it was something like that, or they've never trailed at halftime and led. There was something where they are not good in the second half, and they were losing to BC. So that was a big moment for Michigan State to kind of come back and win that football game. I remember them talking about in the broadcast. I think it was something like they haven't outscored an opponent in the second half, or it was either that or they've never trailed at halftime and then come back and won, something like that. And then obviously they did that against BC. That was a heck of a game, man. That was a heck of a game. So those are the other games that we're going to be looking at this weekend, Trev. And we did have a quick super chat that I want to get to here before we move on. From our guy Pete Weber, says a little donation for the tailgate Saturday. Which players, in your opinion, is the best chances to see a significant production increase from week 1 to week 3, given the positional matchups versus Texas A&M? Real quick, Pete, just a reminder, we will not be having a tailgate this weekend. Our tailgate will be NC State and USC back-to-back, so we are not doing that for a host of reasons. But thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate that. Trev, what do you think? What players, in your opinion, have the best chance for a production increase from week 1 to week 3, given the positional matchup against A&M?
Yeah, I think it starts with Jeremiah Love. I do not see him ending a game with 33 rushing yards. I just don't. I think he gets into the end zone this week. I think he has at least 50 to 60 rushing yards given. I mean, he could get that on one play. And then again, I don't think that Jaden Greathouse ends the game with 0 receiving yards. And so I know some of those are kind of the more obvious answers, but just based on matchups, I think that Tyreek Chappell is the nickel corner for Jaden Greathouse. I like Greathouse in that matchup. I do. I think he's going to be targeted more than 3 times this week in the offense. And then again, just by numbers alone, Jeremiah Love isn't going to end today or end Saturday with 33 rushing yards. So those would probably be my 2.
I'm with you. Can't think of better ones to end on. So, Pete, thank you so much for that, man. I do appreciate you. Those are kind of obvious ones. What about defensively? I'd say Jason Onye is a guy to keep an eye on. Don Schuler, I thought, had a pretty quiet game. Those are a couple other guys that, based on matchups, I think could be poised for production jumps this week. So that'll do it. Trev, why don't you take us out of here?
Yeah, listen, folks, another fun show today. We will be back. Actually, Brian and Sean will be back tomorrow for RTCF at 1 o'clock. Yeah. And then I will be back with the crew on Saturday night doing the post-game show for the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. The guys go live tonight on IB Nation Sports Beat. They're going to talk a little bit more about the matchup. They're going to talk about some of the things that Freeman talked about in his virtual press conference, I believe. You can find that IB Nation Sports Beat. That's tonight at 5. On your way out of here, please be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Irish Breakdown channel as well as the CFB Nation channel. Vince and I are going live at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. We're going to be breaking down different spreads, betting lines, some player props for the games this weekend. You're not going to want to miss it because there's going to be some fun topics of conversation. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So for Brian, I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.